Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Tuesday, August 22nd, and I hope y'all are having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and today we have a great broadcast lined up for you with some amazing interviews talking about all things DevOps, security, AI, and more. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
Is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm happy to be joined again by my friend Mav Turner. Mav is the CTO for the DevOps business line over at Tricentis. And of course, if you watch Techstrong TV at all on a regular basis, you know Tricentis is one of our go-to partners. They partner with us on the DevOps Unbound video series, which is both a bi-weekly video show, about 45 minutes, where we really dive deep into DevOps, as well as like every month and a half, we do a live roundtable of it as well, which is pretty cool. We get the audience with a live audience. So check that out, DevOps Unbound. But we're not here to talk DevOps Unbound today. Mav has some exciting news to share with us from Tricentis. Hey, Mav, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me again, and great to be here talking with you and with your audience. We have a lot of exciting stuff coming on at Tricentis, and so appreciate the chance to share that out. For those of your viewers that may not be familiar, Tricentis, test automation is where we started, but we've been building a business that does so much more and trying to connect and help that overall quality engineering story. So whether you're writing code as part of some early stage startup, or you're a mature organization with a lot of complexity in your environment, Tricentis has a solution to improve the quality of your, not only the process, but also the output, and helping teams work together and accelerate their time to market, and increase speed, increase quality. And that's what we're about. Absolutely.
And Mav, if you wouldn't mind, I introduced you to CTO DevOps business. Of course, DevOps is a major part of Tricentis' business model, and as is now, we're going to talk about mobile as well. But why don't we talk a little bit about your role there as CTO? What do you day to day, what are you doing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It changes every day, it seems like. So in general, my main responsibility is I lead the R&D team, which is product managers, UX designers, researchers, developers, testers, operations teams, security folks. How do we build the right products, get them to the market, enable our customers to be successful, right? Get out of their way as far as helping them achieve their objectives. So I'm leading those teams, which means that we're enhancing existing products, we're building new products. On the build by partner spectrum, we've always got something going on in each of those dimensions, which is one of the things that's exciting to talk about today. And in addition to that, so I lead that, we call it the DevOps business and portfolio. And a lot of people say, what is that? That doesn't make any sense. But really the goal there is to convey, if you're using more modern software development practices and you're trying to get to a continuous delivery model, how can we create tools for those teams that are being successful? In addition to some of the other parts of our business that typically are much larger, much more complex organizations that are looking for enterprise end-to-end testing and performance engineering and test management at scale. That's the kind of our core business unit that most people are familiar with, Tricentis. And those teams are on a similar journey, right? They're trying to accelerate their testing, trying to get a good understanding of what happens when they need to scale across tens of thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of users, what happens to the application under test in those environments, all those challenges. So every day is a little bit different. I kind of bounce around different parts of the organization, but it keeps it fun. So one day I'll be on a call with a company with 50 people, and the next I'll talk to a Fortune 5 business. And so it's really great to get that different perspective. And the challenges are actually, interestingly, fairly similar. And they're more similar than dissimilar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? It sounds like you're having fun, and that's the most important thing, man. So
Yeah.
keep doing what you're doing. Mav, let's jump into today's topic, though, and that is, I mentioned before, mobile's becoming a huge part, not only of the Tricentis story, but in the testing and DevOps and application world in general, right? I think we crossed the Rubicon some time ago where a majority of the users are on mobile devices versus laptops or, heaven forbid, desktops, right?
Yeah. We've been talking about it in the industry for a while, but it's, one of the interesting things that happened during COVID was even though people were at their house and home, we saw a massive shift in mobile traffic. All of our users, customers have told us this, just because the convenience and it's always there, right? You're just always on it. So.
Agreed. So go ahead, man. I'm going to let you tell the story.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So as you said, Alan, mobile has just become more and more important and critical in everybody's business. And some businesses, it's their entire business, right? And some it's, hey, we've got users, they're shifting between the desktop app, they're shifting from the browser to the mobile device. Some of those mobile devices are native apps. Some of them are, Flutter or React so that the developer can build once, deploy twice. Some of them are just bounced around between a tablet and a phone and a desktop. So that becomes really challenging for a development team, right? To make sure that experience remains consistent. The user doesn't have any issues as they transition between these different technologies. And for Tricentis, as you said, it's one of the big planks in our strategy as we look forward. I won't get into the bigger picture today because I really want to talk about mobile, but of our three key pillars of our business, mobile is one of them. And underlying that is this new release that we just had, which is our release of Tricentis Device Cloud. You may hear people throw out the acronym TDC. I try to use the full name so everybody knows what I'm talking about, but our industry is full of acronyms. But Tricentis Device Cloud is essentially a real physical mobile cloud, mobile device cloud. Mobile device grid is another word, all these different ways to describe it, such that when you're in your functional automation, whether that's Tosca, whether that's Testum, you build out your test and you want to run that against a real device. Now, we all have devices at our desktop we can plug in locally, and that's great for early stage development. But as you scale out and you realize that you need to have coverage for iOS and Android, and you need to be able to be testing between different physical hardware version, you need to be testing across different software versions. All of a sudden, the lab requirements in order to really ensure you have high quality get crazy, and it becomes very expensive to maintain them, and you got to use all the different tricks. We have issues with batteries. If you have it plugged in all the time, the device is gonna, the battery is gonna expand and destroy the device. You get 100 devices together in a lab environment, all connecting to the local wireless or cellular network or Wi-Fi network, and now all of a sudden you've got massive congestion. So all these issues, those are just kind of the easy ones for everybody to understand, make it really hard for a development team, a product team, to have the right infrastructure to get real testing on their devices. And that's just it doesn't work, just the functional component. Most people struggle to have proper functional coverage for their automation. That doesn't even cover, well, what about the performance characteristics? What do I need to understand about the user experience as they go through this? All the analytics about your application's performance and how that varies by hardware platform, by software version, all those dependencies are really important. And just to wrap a big bow around it, one of the things that's particularly challenging with mobile is when you're building mobile, it's not like you own the entire infrastructure and you can ship it like you can with most apps, right? A lot of our teams ship every day. So they can ship to production, they can ship to our SaaS app. That's awesome. With mobile, I make my update and then I submit it to the application process to get approved and reviewed. If I'm going to Apple, I might get kicked back. I might have to wait a while before that application goes live. So when we talk about common theme in our industry about the cost of a bug and how or the earlier you can fix it, the less it costs. With mobile, that's very even more challenging, because if you have an issue, there's this artificial timeline that you have to wait on this external provider that you really can't control. And so being able to detect these and have every commit have a functional run and every release be tested internally to where you have that high quality standard before you even submit your app for review is super critical and can have a major business impact. So anyways, I rambled on for a bit, but I'm really excited about it. And it's,
I don't think you were rambling at all. I think it's an important thing that we need to understand. Now, I got to use the P word here. Okay, platform.
Yeah.
I saw the look on your face. Easy. But would you consider this a full? Is it a full-fledged platform? Is it want to be a full-fledged platform one day? How would you describe that?
No, it's a good question, and I appreciate the word choice and framing your question. So that platform word gets tossed around all sorts of places. So I'll describe it as I can without using the word maybe. So what we're trying to do at Tricentis is to make it as easy as possible for people to build automation across any of the target systems, browsers, desktops, tablets, devices. And you just change the target, you run it. You don't have to re-record all of these tests depending on the specific application system under test. So when we think about platform, we think about the mobile services that are important to enable customers to be successful in this quality journey. And so I wouldn't say that TDC is a platform, Tricentis Device Cloud is a platform. I wouldn't say mobile is a platform. I view them more as services that connect in with the larger Tricentis story. The other reason I was smiling, Alan, is when I talked earlier about the three key themes across the Tricentis product strategy, mobile being one of them. The other one is platform.
Okay.
We have a lot of products. We've done a lot of acquisitions over the years, and we'll continue to grow by building products, buying, by partnering, all these different dimensions. And but one of the things we have not done well historically is bringing these capabilities together in a way that makes it easy for customers to access all of these capabilities. And so I'm a little hesitant to use the P word because we've been talking about it for a long time, but to be perfectly frank, we haven't made good enough progress there. And a lot of our customer experiences and customer journeys are really isolated into these separate products. And so when we build this capability, the reason it's available both in Tosca and in Testum is because we're creating shareable services that can get consumed by these other products. And so it's a platform service, but in of itself is not a platform. And when we think about what we're doing with our larger portfolio, again, on the core side with our test management, with Q-Test, with Neoload and our performance engineering, and with capabilities and with our test automation portfolio, there's several products we have in our functional test automation. Right now, those are still lots of islands and silos, and there we're bringing those together in a common SaaS platform in a way that customers can more easily consume these different services. And mobile is one of the things that I think we have done well in the more recent term about making these services available to different consumers and different workflows and different products. And so I think we have done a fairly good job there about with mobile, because we're talking about Tricentis Device Cloud today, these real physical devices that are available. But prior to that, we've earlier this year launched a lot of capabilities around mobile test automation in general, right? So this is this announcement, and also early July, I forget the exact date, but early July we announced the acquisition of a company, Waldo, which is it's the other side of it. So today we're talking about Tricentis Device Cloud, real physical devices. Waldo does an amazing job, and the reason we were interested in them, of taking your emulator and simulators and having a virtual grid. And so when you think about this, you think about A, the cost of a physical device, and B, the speed at which you can kind of run tests. You're a little limited on the hardware side. There's times when an emulator or simulator is sufficient. And we're trying to make it easier for people to take these virtual grid and these physical grid, and again, run it fully integrated into your pipeline. And then at different times target the physical versus the real. And we can get in that more if you want to understand, but my point is Tricentis's investment here is, we're building products, we're buying technology, we're partnering with other vendors to bring some other advanced capabilities to market quickly, because it's such a key theme for us when we look at our overall strategy. And so this is a lot more to come, is actually the other key message there.
Yeah, I listening to you, I can't help but think that, right? That there's a lot more to come here. You've put some foundational building blocks now in place via acquisition, development, organic, and now we'll see how they gel and play out going forward. But for people right now who say, hey, this sounds like something, Tricentis Device Cloud, I want to go check it out. What's the flight path here? Where do they go? How do they engage?
Absolutely. So you can go to tricentis.com. You can start a trial immediately in the product, again, of either Testim or Tosca. If you don't know what those words even mean, then you on our website, you'll see mobile, you'll see the Tricentis Device Cloud, and you can start a trial directly in the product. If you're an existing customer, then I would recommend you going, your existing product route. If you're just kind of trying to learn more, tricentis.com has a lot of great links. I'm sure we can share with you some other more direct ones for your customers, for your viewers, if they want to watch a webinar, if they want to get started with a trial, wherever everybody wants to do, right? They want to learn some more. We've got some great content on the site on webinars. They want to start a trial, tricentis.com, start a trial a day, start playing with it.
I love it. Mav, I want to thank you for coming on and telling us about the new Tricentis Device Cloud. And I encourage everyone to go check it out. And it sounds like we'll have reason to talk going forward as we continue along this mobile journey that Tricentis is going down. Maybe even we'll put it on DevOps Unbound one day. We'll see how that goes.
That'd be great. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate the time.
All righty. Mav Turner, CTO DevOps Business for Tricentis here, telling us about Tricentis Device Cloud. Go check it out. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back here on Techstrong TV.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're talking with Rob Henshaw, who's the CMO for Cameo, and we're talking about a new relationship that they created with Google to drive virtual application delivery, and we're going to jump into what all that means in a minute. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mike. Good to be here.
Take a couple of minutes and describe for us what you guys are doing with Google, how this whole virtual application delivery thing works, because of course everybody knows about virtual desktop infrastructure from back in the day, but now we live in the age of the cloud, so what's changing?
That's exactly right, Mike. So virtual desktops have been around for decades. It's pre-cloud technology. And virtual desktop VDI has evolved over time to become DaaS. But all virtualizations typically take the similar approach of first presenting you with the full Windows desktop in order to give you access to your applications. So Cameo's approach has always been focused on virtual app delivery, which is removing the desktop from the equation altogether and just giving your people super streamlined access to their applications from any device. So what we were doing with Google, Cameo's been a Chrome Enterprise recommended partner and a Google Cloud partner for years. But what we've launched now is something called Chrome OS Virtual App Delivery, which is a new service that has integrated Cameo's technology into Chrome OS, giving people the ability to take advantage of all the benefits that Chrome OS brings to an organization. More cost effective, far easier to manage, way more secure. Taking advantage of Chrome OS in the enterprise while making sure that all of your people have seamless access to all the business critical apps that they need to be productive without having to put them through the pain of going into a virtual desktop every time they need to access an application.
those applications, does it matter what they're originally written in? I mean, does everything have to be Chrome OS end to end, or can they be Windows or whatever else is floating around?
No, that's exactly the magic, is that with virtual app delivery, you can deliver any application, whether that be legacy apps, Windows apps, Linux apps, your SaaS apps, internally developed web apps. Anything can be delivered as a PWA on Chrome OS. So, or any device for that matter. But with the Chrome OS virtual app delivery service, the combination of Chrome OS and Cameo, it makes it really simple to deliver all of your applications, regardless of what they are, the underlying application is, being able to deliver all of those side by side in your taskbar on Chrome OS, so that from an end user perspective, virtualization really becomes kind of invisible. They just click on their apps, the apps open up in their own windows just like they normally would, just as if they were installed locally on the device. So the end user doesn't even technically have to know that they're using a virtual app. They're just using the full desktop version of the apps that have been delivered to them.
Do you think that because of the current economic climate, that more people are reevaluating how they think about the delivery of applications and accessing that? Because we've been talking about some of this stuff for a while, but is it sort of counter-cyclical? Every time there's a downturn, everybody kind of looks up and says, maybe we should rethink the total cost of IT.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the current economic situation definitely plays a part in that. I think that we started to see, especially during the pandemic, a lot of organizations start to rethink the way that they deliver applications and give people access to everything that they need. And then obviously now that people are either committed to remote full time, or going committed to staying hybrid, or even bringing people back to the office, everybody has the same situation of having a deep need to give people access to all their applications, regardless of where they happen to be that day. And so the current economic situation, I think in any climate, IT needs to always figure out ways to reduce the cost of their overall environment. But right now, in this economic climate, I think that is definitely accelerating that. It's putting it to the head of things and helping people realize that, okay, well, maybe the way that we've been doing it for 20 years isn't always the most efficient way. And that, I definitely think, is getting people to rethink the idea of the desktop in general. And if you look at the VDI and DaaS space, you're starting to see a lot of that turmoil kind of play out. Is that you've seen Citrix was acquired by private equity, VMware is getting acquired by Broadcom, which leaves their DaaS service kind of in question. Nutanix recently divested itself of its DaaS business. NetApp had shut down its DaaS business earlier this year. So the traditional way of doing things, of virtual desktops, it's really complex. It's very costly, and it's just hard to manage over time. So it's not just the upfront cost of virtual desktops. It's how much it costs to manage those deployments long term. And that's one of the things that virtual app delivery helps with, is that, and we actually just finished a new study that's been released recently with the analysts over at Enterprise Strategy Group, and they did a 3-month-long economic validation study of what the total cost of ownership is comparing virtual desktops to virtual app delivery. And virtual app delivery typically reduces the total cost of ownership by 54% compared to virtual desktops, because you're not having to manage all that infrastructure yourself. You're not having to deliver and manage the entire desktop. You're just publishing the apps and giving people secure access to those. So I do think that while cost is always important to every IT organization, the current economic climate is accelerating those conversations.
And where does security fit into this conversation? Because I feel like a lot of the things that we're trying to protect are maybe a little long in the tooth, and they're kind of harder to protect. So maybe, is newer better from a security perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that newer is always better. In this case, it certainly is. I think that one of the things that we saw over the last several years, especially as more people went remote and hybrid, is that legacy virtual desktops, legacy remote access technologies, which rely heavily on RDP alone, became a serious problem. So RDP became the largest attack vector for ransomware. Over 50% of all ransomware attacks utilize RDP as the primary attack vector. And so going through the process of taking, something that was a pre-cloud technology like VDI and evolving it over time to try to kind of fit the square peg into the round hole of this cloud first world that we now live in clearly hasn't worked that well. And so services like virtual app delivery, like with Cameo, were designed as, first as a cloud first technology. We've always been, based in the cloud. We can be fully hosted. There's a fully hosted version of Cameo that runs in Google Cloud or in Microsoft Azure. There's also a self-hosted version of Cameo that can be run in any cloud of your choice or on-premise, hybrid, whatever you want. So the fact that we've designed this as a cloud-first system, but also with a zero trust model baked in at the core, we separate your applications from your device. No applications are actually delivered or installed on your devices locally. So we separate the apps from the device. We separate the devices from the network, from the corporate network. We have segmentation. We eliminate lateral movement. So all the traditional zero trust security measures are taken with Cameo and with virtual app delivery. And then through this combination of Chrome OS and Cameo, you get this kind of dual benefit of Chrome OS's deep security benefits and their zero trust model, which is, Chrome OS is still, an operating system that has, never had a reported ransomware attack. You take advantage of all the security benefits of Chrome OS and you just layer on the additional zero trust benefits of Cameo for a really, super secure way of giving people access to all their apps.
I think a lot of people have it in their heads, and maybe it's a generational thing that, it's either Windows or Mac, and they don't really think too hard about Google Chrome OS. So is that changing with the kids are coming out of school? A lot of them had exposure to it. So is something fundamentally going on here?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a massive shift over the last 3 years in terms of enterprise adoption of Chrome OS. And I think that's just going to continue to pick up steam. Not just because of students who have grown up with it coming into the workforce, which definitely plays a part, but also just the idea that organizations being able to take a look at devices nowadays and make a choice based on what is going to be the most secure, what's going to be easy to manage, and what's going to give their people the experience that they expect to have. And I think that traditionally there was this inertia around okay, well, we're going to use, Windows devices because our organization relies on these, 15 legacy Windows applications, and that's just the easiest way to do it. Nowadays, if you strip away the need for that OS and say you can take advantage of all those applications with the same experience that your people have always had, but you can do it on a more secure, more cost-effective, more sustainable device, it makes that decision easier and it frees up people to make those decisions and the flexibility to kind of use the devices that they want. There's also huge benefits with something called Chrome OS Flex. Chrome OS Flex is a system that lets you repurpose your existing PCs and Macs and turn them into Chrome OS devices, so that if your organization is bought in and is looking forward to migrating to Chrome OS for all the security and cost benefits, but you don't want to waste your investment in these existing devices, or it's not time for you to refresh those devices yet, you can go ahead and make the move to Chrome OS, convert those devices into Chrome OS now, and then on your existing refresh cycle, start to refresh with new Chromebook or new Chrome OS devices.
Ultimately, do you think the application experience might get better with this approach because we are starting to see more bandwidth out there, and maybe we can streamline the delivery of the code as well because maybe we're not pushing as many bits over the wire? I'm just speculating, but what's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you get to a place where where the device where the device doesn't matter as much, where you can, still access any app that you need, where every app essentially becomes a SaaS app. I do think that overall the application experience gets better. Right now, a majority of us do most of our work, probably 75 to 80% of our work in a SaaS-based environment, right? Most of the tools that we use are SaaS-based. But then a lot of us have these select applications that we rely on, whether it's our ERP systems or EHR for the healthcare industry, or legacy CRM systems, where even though there may be a SaaS version of that, your company's invested decades of time and money in customizing that CRM solution, so you still need the full legacy desktop version. All of those solutions now become available to you just as if they were a SaaS-based solution, but still giving you all the traditional benefits you've had of the full desktop version. So I do think that the application experience, and that's really the focus of this partnership with Google and the Chrome OS team, is providing people with a completely seamless cloud-first experience, regardless of the application, and making it really, really simple for users to access whatever they need to be productive.
All right, folks. Well, you heard it here. Just because it's called a desktop doesn't mean it has to be running on a machine and sitting on your lap. It can be anywhere. Rob, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Take care.
Back to you guys in the studio.
In today's fast-paced and ever-evolving digital landscape, digital readiness has become a fundamental imperative for enterprise success. Business leaders need to understand how to leverage cutting-edge technologies such as AI, machine learning, and data analytics to accelerate digital transformation, boost business growth, and be at the forefront of driving exceptional customer experiences. On September 13th, 2023, Digital CXO Virtual Summit will focus on all the current issues surrounding digital transformation. Industry leaders will share valuable insights gained from their own digital transformation journeys and tips on how to become a future-ready technology business that sustains long-term growth. They'll also address common challenges that C-suite executives face in driving digital initiatives and provide practical strategies to overcome them. Register for Digital CXO Virtual Summit today.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, this is Shira Rubinov. I'm here with Aviv from Pantera. Aviv, it's such a pleasure to be with you here today. Can you please share with our audience who you are and what you do with Pantera?
Hi, Shira. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
My name is Aviv Cohen. I head marketing in Pantera. Pantera, for those who don't know, is a security validation software company. What we do is identify risk and help its mitigation, and we do it by emulating real attacks. Exactly taking the adversary point of view and running tests against one infrastructure. Actually, our customers do it themselves in a DIY fashion. Mm-hmm. Just run the tests against the latest attacks and see what they need to fix in their infrastructure to reduce exposure. It's as simple as that, really.
Excellent. And how do you differ from other companies out there?
So the big banner we carry is automated security validation, which means, as opposed to if we go back at the day, pen testing is a manual operation and security audits are also manual. We do it completely automated. Right. It's just amazing. Some people compare it like to a house iRobot Roomba,
okay,
where you set the scope or the template and you press test, and Pantera actually does the rest. And it does a work of a pen tester, fully automated, available to you 24/7. Many of our customers, and we have over 800 enterprise customers in production today, I use Pantera daily. So if you want to compare it to what was like old days, like once a year pen test, okay, and then throughout the year you have no really good idea of what your posture is in terms of the attacker perspective. Now you can run it daily and make incremental, like in a very agile sprint way, to kind of do incremental patching and remediation and keep that strong posture. Mm-hmm. So automation is one of the big differentiator. We're also an agentless technology.
Oh, that's important.
So some people compare it to different breach and attack simulation players, BAS. Mm-hmm. In that case, you need to install agents in all places of your infrastructure and run some playbooks of attacks between them.
Yeah.
Forget about all that.
Too many layers.
It's too many layers, too much maintenance, and actually it's not how hackers do. Like hackers don't come install agents and then...
Hang on a second, let me get everything in place, then we'll go, right?
Okay, so the thing about security validation, you want to validate as close as possible to the real threat. So Pantera acts, and that's why it's, by the way, agentless, completely like an attacker. You don't need to give it anything, you don't need to install anything, and it's fully automated. So these are the two great differentiators, like fully automated and an agentless platform you can run every day and test your security, again, against the latest attacks. Perhaps it's worth mentioning a couple more differentiators. One is our substantial research team. So what we do when threats come about, and sometimes we're ahead of the curve, we re-engineer a safe replica of that, let's say malware, and insert it constantly into the updates of the platform. So the test you ran yesterday is not the test you're going to run today. As threats evolve, you want your automated security validation to also keep updated. And we assure that because we have this substantial research team.
Well, that's very important, and you're certainly taking a strong stance and the proactive stance of cybersecurity proactivity. You know, in the past it was really being reactive. How do we deal with it once it happens? And you're really mitigating threats and teaching and training as well, which is really important. And I'd actually like to segue to something incredible that you guys produced, and kudos to you. Your book, Castle Defenders. And this is a children's book that you wrote, and it talks about teaching children about being cyber secure. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about this and the importance behind teaching young children about being cyber secure, what that means, and what was the brainchild behind this book as well?
So thank you for saying that. So as Pantera continues to grow and we're a cyber unicorn, we feel obligated to contribute to the community. And this is one of our ways to contribute. The first thing we thought about is really, it came out of a place of respect to this community, to the defender community. The cyber community defenders actually defend our way of life. So think about a single day that all of cyber defenses would be down. Instantly, you won't have electricity, food, energy, transportation, healthcare, communication. And to substantiate that, just think about all the attacks that happened, let's say in the past 10 years, happening just in one day. So it would be complete havoc. Now, these people put a lot of effort, and I would say also sacrifice, working day and night to defend our way of life. And I think the way that they're perceived are not like, say, equivalent other essential workers, like police officers, firefighters. They're treated in one way, and cybersecurity people are much less understood and therefore much less appreciated. I think one of the things that's most important got us to write this book is from a place of respect and appreciation. So, and it starts with the family. Yeah. So if a few of the children, we ask many of our customers, do your children know what you're doing? They say, no, they don't know. They just know I go out to work and I come back late. That's all they know. Okay, so the book would change that to be much more understood. Then the next thing is about the young generation. The young generation is online and needs to understand the risk of fraud, all the risks that are online, and understand, let's call it cyber literacy, is something we should encourage, both for their well-being as well as for them to possibly join the defender ranks later on. So when you see like a hero image when you're young, when you grow up, you want to follow suit, perhaps.
Of course.
Your parents. So understanding the parents, understanding cybersecurity. Now, the process of writing this book actually took us quite a few months. We had children's psychiatrists advise us to make sure everything is proper, to take all these complicated concepts of internet, cyber, prevention, detection, response, zero trust, and put them in a book about defending a castle, which is the essence of the book. And we actually gave it as a beta test to a few children. We got like great reviews, and now we're rolling the book out to more and more people. which are sending them us like a lot of raving pictures of the kids reading. Kids actually saying like, "Dad or Mom, can you read it to me again?" That's the greatest compliment. So it's very well received, and I think it came in just to that niche where there was nothing for the ages of 5 to 12 to explain what cybersecurity is in terms children can understand. So that's a great start.
Well, I think that's very important. And this day and age, kids are growing up with the internet, with devices, with connectivity, with communication, and to teach them from a young age what it means to be cyber secure and what it means to be a defender, as you put it, really also not just keeps them secure, but think about a larger type of system or organization. Let's say this child's parent is, a CEO of a company or a large family office or a bank, and they're a child that might be risky behavior online that could lead to all sorts of problems. So starting any type of education from young, certainly cybersecurity is so critical. And there was a hole, I would say, in the industry and a lot of talk around educating middle schoolers and high schoolers, but this age group is so important. So really congratulations to you for really finding this space and taking care of it.
So a little bird whispered to me that you have some background in psychology.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I used to be a psychologist before my cybersecurity career.
And children specifically.
In children and teenagers, yes.
So the thing about cybersecurity is that, yes, there's the technology aspect, but there's also the human aspect.
Yep.
So about the human factor is always what is called like the weakest link, but it's weak just in terms of cybersecurity. The thing is that even companies invest a lot in educating the employees. But for children to defend themselves, and the book also has like the 10 commandments of safe online conduct, so to speak.
Yes.
It's really important to become like cyber literate, and in the same way you say to don't talk to strangers on the street, in cybersecurity is don't click on this link. It's a way that people need to evolve and understand the online modern world from a young age. And I think the book is like a very positive step towards that. But again, it came from a place of respect to this community. So Pantera on one hand is doing like great as a cyber unicorn, one of the top 5 growing cybersecurity companies in the world today. But we had a privilege, myself and a great team of marketing that put this book together to actually also contribute to something that has nothing to do with our technology.
Right.
So I feel that's a little bit of a privilege. There's the book, right? And we also have a coloring book to go with it. And I always say soon the audiobook and, the movie and the play, right?
Excellent.
It's like
you need them all.
we need to put them all together.
The thing that you mentioned, the human factors piece, that's where I deal heavily in the cybersecurity world. We talk about the people, the process, and the technology. You need great people. You need to deal with the human factors. You could have the best technology out there, but the process is the glue. And as you said, they say the people are the weakest link in the chain. So I counter that. I said, make them part of the solution. And you're doing this from a young age. You're literally taking that human factors piece of saying the human's the weakest link. Why are they the weakest link? The weakest link because they're not either educated, they don't know. They call it the negligent insider threat. Take all that away. Teach them from a young age up. Have it part of their culture that they are cyber secure and they do recognize what is important and how to conduct themselves. It'll lead to much better security as they grow older, but also within their lives. So it really covers many bases.
And it's very much in line with statistics that says that within the insider threat family, the majority of it is unintentional.
Correct.
Where people unintentionally bring in like contamination and threats into the organization, but that's just because they got it somewhere else and unknowingly played a role in the kill chain without any intent. So that's definitely that.
Correct.
Aside from that, I would say it's a fun book. And I do advise, like, especially people with children at the ages of 5 to 12 to just take a read. It can be found on Amazon. So just Castle Defenders on Amazon is a good start, and it's already a bestseller, so it will pop up on the top of the search. No worries.
Well, that's wonderful. And I know that Pantera's here at Black Hat, And can you share with our audience, we're live streaming at Black Hat, where you are on the booth floor, what your number of the booth is, so people come visit you and see a demo and talk to some folks there, as well as any other happenings you have going on at Black Hat?
So definitely. We're at booth 2400. And we have 6 demo stations waiting for people to come and see, the Pantera technology at work and how we validate security and advise on remediation in an automated way. Also, worth noting is that we're having on Thursday night a big party in the hackathon. Said to be the big party of the event. So I advise also to come to the 2400 booth to get your wristband and register. And really happy to partner with anyone and kind of grow, at the end of the day, grow an enterprise to be cyber strong.
Excellent.
That's the point, to be proactive, reduce risk dramatically, and be cyber strong. If you see analysis of breaches, most of them could have been prevented with the current stack. That's the reality. Something was misconfigured. It's always the anomaly. One file, one password.
That's all it takes.
All it takes.
Yeah.
But you can also find those. If you have security validation software that covers your entire attack surface on a continuous, regular basis, and does so with a click of a button. That's the value, and anyone who wants to kind of listen or hear more, really happy to receive people in our booth.
Well, excellent. It certainly sounds like something that people should take a look at, and I encourage the audience to stop by the booth. Anyone who's here at Black Hat, you know where to find them. And Aviva, it was a pleasure speaking with you today, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. And this is Shira Rubinoff reporting live here at Black Hat, and stay tuned for upcoming interviews. Thank you.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi everyone, we're back here on Thursday in Las Vegas for Black Hat. You know, Thursday of Black Hat week is always an interesting day because a lot of the people are transitioning to DEF CON.
Yes, and they're already
and
tired.
The rest of them are right, and the rest of them are heading
leaving.
home. They've been here all week.
Yeah.
So it's always a fun day like that. Of course, my friend sitting here with me has seen his share of Black Hats over the years. I'm happy to introduce you to Amr Dever. Amr's been a fixture in cybersecurity for as long as I've been in cybersecurity. Hard to believe, but it's probably 25 years.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a pleasure to have him on here. Amr is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Normalize, and that's Normalize.
Correct, yes.
Right?
Correct.
It's normalize.com.
.ai.
.ai, excuse me. You know, they didn't have .ai 25 years. Yes, but it's normalize.ai.
Yeah.
And look, we could sit and reminisce about old times all day, but we're not going to do that to you. We're going to talk about Normalize. But just, you know, before we do, Amr, as I mentioned, you're in cyber and InfoSec 25 years. What got you excited about Normalize, right? Because every entrepreneur I know, and you're an entrepreneur, we can't just, look, starting a company, you put your guts into it, right? It's not something you do because, I'll take a shot, right?
Yeah.
You do it because you feel it.
Correct, yes, yeah.
Tell us
you
about
know, I mean, I was, a lot of people know I was at Qualys for 18 years almost, and we had a great product there, a lot of focus on, the focus was on infrastructure security mainly. So, and after Qualys and doing some soul searching, talking to customers, and of course interacting with my co-founder right now, Ravi Aital, the focus around data kept coming up again. Each time we talked to a customer, to a chief security officer, and it felt like it's really the right problem that needs to be solved now, considering all the changes that are happening in customers' environments, moving from on-prem to the cloud, and all that transformation that's happening. Data is becoming a big focus for many reasons that we can talk about today. And that's really what got me excited. It's a big problem that needs to be solved, that requires a lot of innovation. and a lot of new ways to address it because the old ways, the way we're doing DLP before, just does not work.
No.
It has a lot of efficacy issues and cost and deployment and all of that. So it just, as an entrepreneur and someone is a cybersecurity lover, aficionado, whatever you want to call me, it felt really this is the next problem that we need, that I wanted to tackle.
Absolutely. So I look at it, there's two big drivers for this, to me anyway. Number one, I would say for the last, let's say, 12 years, 15 years even, there was a big shift, and it's funny, we're here at Black Hat. Black Hat's the recipient of it. We you know, when you and I first came in, it was network security.
Yes.
That was where security was. We moved to application security.
Yes.
AppSec became king.
Yeah.
Black Hat is the prime example of it, right? And we focused on the application. Was the application coded correctly?
Correct.
Was it deployed on the right infrastructure? Was there buffer overflows? Was there backdoors? Was there, you know, it was all about the application.
Correct. Yeah.
At the same time, with the cloud, storage, data storage blew up.
Correct.
Right? We'd store, I mean, I know we're a nothing company here, but the amount of video data we store is mind-boggling. So you had this huge amount of data that a lot of people couldn't even wrap their head around. And all of a sudden, at some point, and it happened during COVID, people started realizing it's about the data, stupid, right?
Exactly.
The app is good. You need a secure app.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's the data that are the crown jewels. The app is a means
Correct. Yes.
to an end.
Correct. Yeah.
It's the data.
And basically the understanding or the preface that we had, okay, if we secure the infrastructure or we secure the application and we secure where the data is, where we think where the data is, then we secure the data.
Right.
As you know, that breaches continue to happen and more breaches are happening. And fundamentally that model where, okay, if we secure where the data is, that means it's secure, is no longer valid, especially in cloud environments. Why? Because the data is moving everywhere. You have now engineering teams and development teams, they're in control of just pushing more and more workloads and more applications and doing updates, you know, twice, 3 times, 4 times a day.
Sure.
And with all of that, new data comes, new sensitive data comes, and it moves around within the cloud environments and a multi-cloud environment at a very fast speed. So that model where, okay, I'm going to secure that infrastructure where the data is, or the app itself is going to secure me from breaches, it will help, of course, and will help, you know, and it needs to be done. But also understanding where your data is, where your crown jewels are, what's in them, who has access to them, and the contact and the environment that they're in, and connecting all these dots together in an intelligent way to give you that notion where the risks are around your sensitive data is really a very important aspect right now to protect yourself and secure yourself from breaches.
Sounds like a great reason to start a company.
Exactly, and that's kind of what Normalize focus is. When we started, we called it Data First Cloud Security, Data Security for the Cloud, and really it's now evolving. Gartner calls it Data Security Posture Management, which is kind of a new category, very much focused on understanding posture, the security posture around the data.
DSPM.
DSPM, yes.
So that's a new term for you guys out there to focus in on DSPM, Data Security Posture Management.
Yeah.
God bless Gartner when they come up with these names. I know.
A complicated name maybe, but
yes.
it captures the essence of what we're trying to do, and it's good to have a category, and analysts now are all kind of rallying behind it, which is very
Excellent.
helpful.
And that does. Look, I saw it, you know, when we did NAC, we had some silly name for it. They named it Network Access Control. We said, okay
that
go
makes
with
sense.
it. So
Let's go for
DSPM it is.
Exactly.
So let's, I think we've set that table. Let's now talk about what Normalize does to help with DSPM and
Great. Yes,
what
so-
people need to know.
So the other also thing, big requirement and shift that we've seen is when you're looking at data, you can't just look at it in one place. You have to look at data everywhere. You have to understand data across IaaS, across your PaaS environment, across SaaS, across on-prem. So you really need to have that vision that really allows you to get visibility of your data everywhere. And fundamentally at Normalize, our mission is to really help you understand where all your data is, what's in your data, where are the risks around your data, where are the privacy gaps and compliance issues around your data, and then build kind of this dashboard where everything you know that you need to know about your data in one place that can give you that ongoing continuous visibility and ability to proactively know where the risks are and address them around your data. We started, of course, focusing on cloud environments when we launched the company, but now we're expanding our presence specifically on-prem also because in hybrid cloud environments because this is where customers are like we need to know everywhere where our data is.
You got to go where the data is.
Correct. So the first thing we do, which is the use cases we help customers with, first of all, getting discover where your data stores are, structured and unstructured, and then understand what's in them, what's the sensitive data they contain, what's the monetary value of that data. So you understand data store A has maybe $300,000 worth of sensitive information.
So how do you put a price on that?
Very good question. So we have a research team. So as we identify the different sensitive data within these data stores, we assign a monetary value to each of these entities based on research that and various approaches that our research team has gathered from public sources and data breaches and other reports, third-party reports. So we can assign a specific value, a dollar value for each sensitive data that we identify. And then you combine it all together on a data store, per data store, to give you what is the actual monetary value within that data store. It's an indication, of course, that doesn't mean it's worth that, but it really helps, and customers love the fact that they have associated a monetary value for their sensitive data, and then they can use it to prioritize and drive remediation when needed. And of course, we let customers customize it based on their own environment and how they want to value the data within their environment. But it's a great start for
Absolutely.
for
I mean, it kind of reminds me of like CVE, CVSS scoring.
In a way, exactly.
Right, except, but you also, again, give the customers a chance to up or
down and say, yes, it has that value, but this data store, for example, it's not in my production environment, so I can reduce that amount. So the first use case again is discovery, and then we take it into classification to understand where the sensitive data is and what type of data, PII, HIPAA, you name it, GDPR. We have hundreds of these sensitive entities, and we connect them together via proximity to show, for example, your name and social security number and credit card number are within the same proximity, so that even it's definitely considered PII data. So it really helps increase accuracy of these results, as well as the reduction of false positives, which can be very problematic.
Let me talk a question a little bit on the discovery phase. There's the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. How do you find data that you may not know about that's there?
Now with the beauty in cloud and using the cloud APIs, it helps you in looking into logs and understanding. You can interrogate the entire environment very easily and grab a lot of telemetry and information from the cloud environment that allows you to really identify in a very accurate way where your data stores are, what type of data stores they are, structured and unstructured. And then from there, we connect to these data stores in a very transparent way through IAM roles in order to scan that data and to classify it. And the scanners are orchestrated in a way where they come to you where the data is. We don't take any data out, we don't copy it out, we don't transport it out of the environment. So they come to you where the data is, perform the classification, and disappear. And all of that is done in a very cost-effective, efficient way to help customers really scan the data quickly and get the information they need. So,
what about scale? Because that, as I mentioned earlier, that's the second part of this conundrum.
Correct.
Is there's
Yes.
so much
yes.
data.
So,
how do you scale?
And there's a lot of mechanisms that you have to think about when you're thinking about data and scanning data and scaling for data, which is again, and cloud really helps you which is from the grounds up when we built the platform. Scale was a big part of our mission because we want to do it everywhere for small, medium, large customers across all the clouds and wherever their data is. So. We've built the backend. It's a graph-based backend to house all that information, and that can scale very, very well as customers add more data and more information. And it allows us also to search the results very quickly and to provide the information. Like you can go in and show me where all my data stores that have this type of information, that have this type of risk associated with them, or this privacy issue, and the graph gives you the information pretty much momentarily in real-time basis. So and everything is kind of built at the scale of the cloud to allow us to discover quickly, scan quickly. And when you're scanning the data, we have a lot of techniques that we use, like data sampling. For example, if it's a data store that has a lot of machine-generated data, you really don't need to do 100% scan of it. You can do a 10, 5% scan. It gives you a very good understanding of what's the data, what data is in it. However, if it's a very custom type of an S3 bucket that is collecting a lot of information from individual users and many sources, then you might want to do a more extensive scan on that. And all of that, we do a one-pass scan through the file where we collect all the information in one pass. We don't do like a pass for PII data and another.
Right.
Exactly. So it's one time, it goes through the file quickly. We read it, we understand the sensitive entities, and we classify it, and all that information is processed in our backend. So the results come out very quickly, and customers can start seeing it and interacting with it and deciding how to take actions on the risks that were identified and drive remediation.
Got it. So we discover, we categorize, if you will. Classify better, yes. Yeah. Next step is protect?
Is risk, understanding the risks.
Okay.
So you need to understand where that data is, the context it's in it, and who has the access to that data, which is a huge risk factor around it. If Alan has access to a data store, for example, that contains sensitive information, HIPAA data, PII data, but you haven't accessed that data for 6 months, 8 months, why do you need to have access to it? Removing that access immediately helps eliminate risks associated with that access that you have. So understanding access to the data and applying least privilege access to it is a big use case that comes in that phase, followed by understanding all the risks around it. In other words, are there any vulnerabilities, configurations, misconfigurations, or any attack paths by connecting all these dots around it that could lead to a compromise, data compromise. So we immediately present all these risks to the customer and prioritize based on the type of risk, the impact of the risk, and the monetary value associated with the data. It comes with it. And we provide all the remediation actions that you need to do in order to resolve that issue or to resolve that risk and help you drive remediation.
Let me stop you here. When you say you provide all the remediation actions, again, I'm going back to our old vulnerability management days. You're telling them these are the actions you could take, but you're not proactively doing the remediation.
So we connect with SOAR workflows, with SIMs, with ticketing, with Jira, ServiceNow, Slack. We help basically take that intelligence and help to drive DevSecOps to remediate the problem. There were certain actions that we can help from within the product to remediate. For example, removing access. You can remove that from within, if you have the right access, of course, to do it. But fundamentally, when you're in production environments, to do remediation and automated remediation,
scary.
It's a process that you have to orchestrate with your change management and DevOps team. So we want to integrate into that and facilitate it as much as possible. And of course, talking with customers and discussing with customers, remediation will become a big part of the platform as we grow the product.
It was the same thing in vulnerability management. It wasn't enough anymore just to find the vulnerabilities or to tell you what to do.
Got a patch and apply.
There were so many vulnerabilities, right? You had to batch them. You had to start automating.
Yeah.
It's again, it goes back to scale.
Exactly. So that's an area that we will work with customers to mature it. For example, like if a recurring issue keeps coming up again and again, and each time you apply a certain automation to do it, why can't you just apply that automatically and fix the problem? But this has to be, of course, designed and orchestrated the right way, and it'll become a big part of what we do also in the future. So,
I get it.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I wanted a black hat specific question. So here we are in the kingdom of AppSec, right?
Yeah.
The capital of application security. You're here all week. The whole normalized team is here all week. Do the AppSec people get it? Are they understanding that data is king and they got to protect the data? They got to recognize data, protect data.
It's a big focus. So I think just walking through the hall and seeing some of the sessions here and all of that, there's a big focus on API security, on data security. App security, of course, is a big thing, and for all cloud-centric, with that in mind. And also kind of orchestration and workflow and remediation and all of that. I saw a lot of innovation in the space. And just kind of getting the vibe of the show, I feel like it's the same at RSA, by the way, this year. Yeah. We thought it's all going to be about AI and all of that, and there was so much focus on data and data security. So,
excellent. So you mentioned the AI word. Now you mentioned it, we got to talk about it.
Of course, yeah, let's do it. So.
It's got to be a role here for AI.
Absolutely. I mean, we already use it as part of the platform to help provide better remediation and guided remediation for customers on problems. We use it a little bit in our scanning engine also, and then we're going to use it more in the future to better understand like similarity of objects. And so, for example, if you're looking for a specific type of an agreement or type of a document, we can use AI to really help us immediately understand when we scan the data and identify it in a faster way. So it's going to play a big role, I think, in data security in driving guided remediation, and also making sure that data that's going into your models, in and out of your models, and what's in your models, that if it contains sensitive data, that this data is not going to come to bite you in the future.
So I think that right there could be a product in and of itself. Everyone I speak to, whether it's in the media business that we're in or in other businesses, they all want to create their own LLMs, right? They're taking their data, putting it into a vector database, dumping it into an LLM. They put a chatbot in front of it, and now voila, right? Exactly. I have my own custom data set. Understanding what data got in there and what what privacy issues we have.
What comes with it, is very important.
I don't know if people are thinking about that yet.
Customers are definitely thinking about it, and we hear it quite often coming from customers. But the way they're approaching it also, it's like if we have the right visibility and we know where our sensitive data is and what's going in and out of these data stores and are they being used in data modeling and big LLMs, then that's a great start to get started. Yeah. And again, with all of customers, when I think the most important things when you start with trying to understand your data security landscape, you can't boil the ocean. You have to focus on what's important first and get that visibility, the number one thing, because that helps you put the blueprint for how you want to address it and what controls you should put in place and how you manage the entire process in a way that makes you achieve success one step at a time and reaching your final destination. So,
and look, this is best practices in security. You mentioned API security. We saw this with API security. 2 years ago, all of the API security vendors were talking about, do you know what APIs you're even using? Because we can't secure what you don't know you even have.
Correct.
So it was about discovery of API security. Attack surface management is another big area. It's the same thing.
Yes.
If you don't know your surface, how could you manage it?
How could you secure it? Yes.
And so it is the same thing with data. We only have a few minutes left. If you don't mind, look in the camera. For people who are out there saying, yeah, it's time. We got to get serious about data. What's the on-ramp? How do they engage with normalizing and get started here?
Great, very good questions, and it's a discussion I have with CISOs all the time. First of all, there's a lot of innovation in the space, so there's a lot of new ideas and great tech coming out to help solve this problem. So the CISOs now, especially if they have a bad experience from before on DLP, I think they really need to stop and consider and listen to us and to of course at Normalize we are at the forefront of it, and we're having these discussions all the time. And it's easy to get started, especially in cloud environments. It makes it much easier to get. It's always, of course, it's never easy, but it's much easier to get started and to, have a small POC in an environment that you have good control on, to start testing these technologies and see the output and the value that it provides to you and to your organization. And the good thing, if you engage with us, that's not months. It could be days, if not weeks, for you to get started and see value right away.
What's involved? Is it I put a couple agents on my system and let them run?
We're 100% agentless. Basically you connect your cloud accounts back into our platform, and we deploy within their environment in a very special, secure way, very similar to CSPM tools and SIM tools and all of that. And that deployment can be literally, sometimes we do it over Zoom, if you have the right access and you have the right people on the call. And then from there, the scans are happening and off and running. And then you can start tuning it a little bit more, understanding the results a little bit more, and then making changes, and then connecting it, for example, to your various Jira accounts if you want to orchestrate ticketing and integration, or integrating into a SIM, or in order to take a SOAR from there. But it's a pretty frictionless process, and it all happens where the data is. We don't take any data out, we don't transport it, we don't egress it, none of that. So it's
they call that liability.
Well, some approaches before, that's how they addressed the problem,
and it was a liability.
And it didn't help also kind of with certain customers. But that's how we do it, and we encourage you come to our website, join our freemium, which is you can get started on your own, or we can help you get it started. So.
On that note, so there might be people out here who say, look, I'm not a large enterprise. I don't have petabytes of data. We have gigabytes. We're not even
terabytes. Yeah, we see it across. But they all say that, we only think we have that. And they get started and, we didn't know about this and that data store. And someone added that somewhere else within Azure and I didn't know about it. And a new project popped in GCP.
That would actually be an interesting survey. Yeah. So, the before and after, the new customer says, approximately how much data do you have, and then how much data do you really have?
And the beauty is that's again getting that visibility. You really immediately gives you that ability to understand better what you have, and from there you can decide if you want to tackle it all or tackle part of it, or how you. And we help. Our model is licensing model is very simple. It's all you start small, you start large, whatever you want, and then you can grow with us.
All right, so you're not too big or too small to use Normalize.
Everyone has good sensitive data. Everyone wants to protect their crown jewels and the data. In fact, we have a campaign here at the Black Hat with track what matters most for you. And if you come to our booth, we give you an AirTag, so you can use it to.
Really?
Yes.
That's great. That's a good one.
So come get a demo, and you'll get a nice, beautifully branded AirTag, so you can be part of that campaign to track really what's important and what matters to you, your data.
Fantastic.
So.
All right. We're here with Amr Dieber. Normalize, that's normalize.io, though .com will work, but it's normalize.ai. All of these.
The app is .io, right. The website is
but
.ai.
.com
yeah, it works too.
Works as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But most importantly, your data is important, and you need to use a tool like Normalize to get your arms around that. We're going to take a break. We're live here Thursday, wrapping up Black Hat Week. We'll be back in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amr.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live in our Mandalay-based suite at Black Hat. Yeah, he's just downstairs. It's still crazy. Stephen, there's so many people down there. It's like, I get a little paranoid. I'm still not used to big crowds like that. But anyway, we're here with my good friend Stephen Chin from JFrog. And anybody who watches Techstrong TV has probably seen Stephen on with us any number of times. And if it's not Stephen, someone else from JFrog. But we've got a bunch of different news to go over today. And first of all, Stephen, thank you for coming up. Is this your first Black Hat, or have you done Black Hats before?
No, actually, this is my first Black Hat.
That's what I figured, because
Yes, I've been behind the scenes on all of our recent sponsorships of Black Hat, but this is my first time coming out in person. And
what was your impression? Be honest.
It's
just you and I. No one else is here.
I mean, it's
a big show. It's not quite as big as RSA, but it's big.
But I think something else that's nice about this is more of the folks that we care about, like in the AppSec market.
This is an AppSec show.
Yeah, who are doing software security are here, and we're getting in the right sort of conversations. So like discussing stuff with, and we'll talk a bit about some of the announcements coming from the Linux Foundation and other folks who are here. Like this has become the place to talk about and to see where the security industry is going.
Maybe. Maybe. So I think RSA covers security, cybersecurity in all of its facets. I think Black Hat is very AppSec focused, but I think the interesting thing is if you look at the history of what Black Hat is, Black Hat was supposed to be about researchers showing their latest research. And it's morphed into a wannabe RSA in the desert with a specialty in AppSec, quite frankly. And I say that with the most respect. I've been in security 25 years. I liked it better when it was researchers and Barnaby Jack was up on that stage making ATM machines spit out $20 bills. And I've seen a bunch, or people, I don't know, we have people in the background here, you're not on camera, when they would go up and disclose vulnerabilities against Cisco before Cisco fixed them because Cisco was late fixing them. That's when Black Hat was Black Hat, the wall of sheep and those kinds of things. It's tame now.
So I think security research has become a profession. It's a field. We have this huge security research team at JFrog. So we employ some of the best in the business who originally were doing defense and attack for the Israeli military. So they're very good at their jobs. And I think that they're also the people who are doing interesting exploits, showing their research, and they are presenting at conferences like Black Hat.
But then also their companies and the vendors want to show off how to mitigate, how you can actually integrate this.
They want to make money. They want customers.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting, and I don't know if you're staying for DEF CON. So it used to be the Black Hat and DEF CON were very joined at the hip. DEF CON, if Black Hat was edgy, DEF CON was downright raunchy, right? I mean, and now Black Hat has gone corporate and DEF CON is edgy. And, you know, that's fine. I think it's part of the maturation of the entire security space. But that wasn't why we brought in here to talk, Stephen. I wanted to talk a little bit. I had Jens on Techstrong TV, I guess about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, a new JFrog offering. Well, you know it better than me. Let me ask you to talk about it.
Yeah, so I mean, what Jens announced, and this was the initial offering for our new JFrog curation service.
Yep.
But as a longtime developer and somebody who's been using binary repositories as a way of controlling what open source libraries are coming to your business, frankly, what we're doing is actually very simple. We're taking a best practice in the industry, which is to audit and secure and make sure that your developers are pulling only libraries which are vetted and secure, and we're making it easy to do.
Yeah. And for such a simple sounding thing, it's a long time coming, no? I had this conversation with an interview we did earlier today. Part of me wants to think that the people who maintain these repos should have some responsibility to the users of the repos to do at least a reasonable, I'm not saying they got to go over and beyond, but do a reasonable job to make sure that those repos are free of, you know, let's call it really either old versions or very obvious malware and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, so let's back up into what curation is.
Okay.
How it actually defends you, and then like what the upstream risks are. So typical application security looks at scanning and looking for vulnerabilities in deployed apps in production and what you're pushing into production. That's too late. And as you shift left to go to developers, to go to the folks who are building the software, ideally what you'd want is a curated, vetted, secure list of libraries which you're building your software on, so that you're not introducing potentially malicious libraries or software versions with known vulnerabilities or any of that stuff into your software supply chain. Now, where are those libraries coming from? And typically those open source libraries are coming from central repositories.
Yes.
So they're coming from NPM, from Maven Central, from PyPy, from RubyGems, et cetera, et cetera.
Could be Docker Hub.
Docker
as well.
Hub. And I think it's a reasonable question of why can't the upstream central repositories do a lot more of this hard work of securing the supply chain? I think that there is some discussion as well. So I know that there's ongoing discussions in the EU about putting constraints on foundations and folks who supply software libraries to have some responsibility and onus for it. Now the challenge and risk with vulnerabilities is not all vulnerabilities are created equal. And so many things which get a very high CVSS score for enterprise applications, if you're running it inside of a container, if you aren't allowing user access to the system, those vulnerabilities, they might not be exploitable. You may have already mitigated it by, for example, like putting some code in which catches the exception, which blows the stack, or whatever it is that how the exploit is triggered, that already may be mitigated in your code. And that version of the library you're using and the known vulnerabilities against it may not be applicable to you. And it's hard to say that this software version shouldn't be distributed just because it has a vulnerability which may not actually impact people who are using it in production. So and if the central repository takes it away, that's also the system of record for what was this original library and like what did it contain.
Maybe they don't take it away. Maybe they just don't allow it to download, or they download it with a cigarette pack warning or something, right?
Yeah, so I think you'll see a lot of the central repositories are now showing vulnerability info by cross-matching against public databases. They're trying to do a better job of taking down things which are just plain malicious.
Right.
But NPM's huge. How do you monitor and audit something that large? Now, I think when you look at that, this sort of security, what matters more is having the full audit trail and provenance of who built the artifact, where it was packaged, what it contains in terms of dependencies, all of that information, so that your systems can audit, can identify potential risks, and then can stop it from becoming an issue. And it's a combination of what we're doing with curation, which is that's the firewall.
Right. That's the component
which stops
firewall,
it coming in
right?
from your company. But then it's also doing the runtime scanning of what libraries are actually using in production, of being up to date on the latest 0 days and CVs which are coming in, and then having like an end-to-end security strategy where as things move through your DevOps pipeline, you're securing it at each step along the way.
So, taking a longer view, right? This is actually it mimics what we saw in sort of traditional vulnerability scanning back when I was doing security companies, right? There was a guy named Giddy Cohen who actually came out of Israel, and Giddy's company, I forget the name of the company, it's still around, though Giddy, I don't think Giddy's there anymore. But they used to generate what they call attack graphs. So it would be first, okay, there's a vulnerability there. Is it reachable? Is it exploitable? Right? The fact that it was vulnerable in and of itself wasn't it. And I think we're starting to see that now on the left side of the equation, right? In your pipeline.
Yeah, there's a couple things we're doing specifically for that. So one is contextual analysis.
Yep.
So it will actually, from a binary perspective, decompile your code, see if you're calling the affected API or if you've somehow mitigated the vulnerability, and it will tell you this vulnerability is not applicable in an automated way so that you get fewer false positives, it's easier to mitigate. And the other thing which we do, which helps quite a bit, is a JFrog severity score, which is applicable to the enterprise application use case.
Okay.
Rather than the CVSS score, which we still show you, but that's really what
in a vacuum.
The researchers who find the defect propose it. It goes through a committee. There's some scrutiny on it.
But severability in a vacuum. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the actual applicability of that security exploit being targeted in the wild on a typical enterprise system, CVSS score is a very poor match for that as a criteria. And what happens is security teams or DevOps teams, they get told everything with a CVSS score of 5 and higher or 4 and higher has to be mitigated. And they spend a lot of time explaining why vulnerabilities, which don't matter, are not applicable, or really don't pertain to as a real security risk, why they don't have to be. And then conversely, there's some security exploits which are getting underrated for the same reason.
It goes both ways. But here's not the rub, but here's the nightmare. Developers and security teams can't always agree on this. When you put these kinds of decisions in the hands of politicians, such as in both the EU and here in the States, they're talking about rules that say software must be free of all known vulnerabilities. So they're just chopping everyone off at the knees, right? So you can't be any taller than that. Because, if you're a politician who doesn't know this stuff, it's a no-brainer, of course. I don't want software with vulnerabilities. I think that's what we need to be afraid of, and that's why we need to, the old saying, right? The 8 most feared words in the language. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Right? Those are the kinds of things we need to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I think when you look at the recent legislation requirements from NIST and other folks in the government who are doing security, The way it's written, technically, they say it must be free of security exploits which could be applied or could be exploited in the application. And so they're putting the onus of the application creator to then explain or justify why it's not applicable. And also they're putting the onus on the suppliers to know all of the software components, to have a full bill of materials, to know all the components which might potentially be impacted. And the government's power is purchasing, so they can apply this to software that they purchase, but the private sector naturally follows whatever the government does as a best practice.
Military grade, yeah. So that's obvious. That's one issue of it. The second issue is this is not static. You know, what's not exploitable today may very well turn up to be exploitable tomorrow, and vice versa for that matter. And so the problem is, it's like, you know, when PCI, I don't know how much you know about PCI, but when PCI was in its heyday, right, of scaring the hell out of people about being PCI compliant, they had a thing. Not one PCI compliant company was ever breached. Did you know that? Because the moment they were breached meant de facto, you know, de facto on its face, that they were no longer PCI compliant. So with a clear conscience, they'd get up, the PCI committee, or, you know, people who were governing the PCI, and say, we've never had a breach of a PCI compliant company. But what about this one,
so
that
if you applied that to security, we wouldn't have companies selling software anymore.
Exactly. I mean, it's a ridiculous, and that's what I'm afraid with that. We need to pivot though. But before we do, let me tie the loop on curation. Available now. People can go get it at.
So it's part of the JFrog platform, which is an end-to-end DevOps, package management, security, and curation helps you to lock the doors. But then X-Ray, our advanced security offering, those do all the downstream scanning so that you're making sure that everything you're pushing to production is free of known vulnerabilities.
So curation is great. It's not meant to be used alone. It's meant to be part of a bigger set, and you can get it from the JFrog set. All right, let's switch over to your other hat, which is open source, Linux Foundation, board member, advocate. What's happening there?
There's a bunch of exciting stuff which got announced recently from the Rust Foundation, which we're a member of, and also the Linux Foundation, which we sponsor multiple different sub-foundations, including the CNCF, the CDF, and OpenSSF. On the Rust Foundation side, we're really, really happy about their new Rust security report that they announced that talks about what they're doing to secure the Rust ecosystem. They talked about some of the contributions we made earlier this year in terms of finding some big vulnerabilities in the Rust HTTP libraries, working with their security research team to help to create mitigations for that, and then, you know, announcing it so that folks could upgrade and could defend themselves against that. And I think that we feel very strongly that languages like Rust are the way forward because they make it much, much harder to get the sort of buffer overflow, inadvertent type of memory exploits which happen in languages which are not memory safe. But that doesn't mean that it's safe by default, because there's a bunch of other programming errors, not using the memory safety, and different things you can do in your application code, even with Rust, where if you're not paying attention to security, if you're not doing testing, doing fixes, staying up on the latest libraries, making sure you're scanning for potential vulnerabilities in different libraries you're including, you're just as vulnerable as any other language. So I think it's great that the Rust Foundation is both hiring researchers and also leveraging really top industry experts like the folks at JFrog who are working with them on our security exploits or our Rust vulnerabilities.
A quick word on that. I think this is a great example of what we were just talking about, right? Rust was always known as one of the safest, probably most secure languages to be working in going forward. But stuff happens, and we learn what we didn't know then, we know now. And that's just the reason why you got to be constantly reviewing this stuff. And you do, even no matter how good or secure you think something is, you've got to do a periodic review, right? Because you do find stuff. Things change. We learn more.
And I think the other thing which is really exciting is we've been a longtime member of OpenSSF.
Yes.
Which is the Linux Foundation's cross-vendor effort to help secure the open source supply chain. So that's something that us and Amazon, Microsoft,
a bunch of companies,
pretty much like all the big players in the industry are supporting, which is great. But they also launched a new effort called SSP, or Software Security Projects. This is specifically focused on supporting the security tools that security researchers, so CISOs, security research teams, need in order to help secure the software supply chain. So the big announcement is OWASP ZAP, the attack proxy, is going to be moving over to the Linux Foundation. And I think that this is the sort of investment that we all need to see in security research tools so that we can actually become better at defending our ecosystem.
So let me make sure we got this right, though. The Security Software Project, SSP, is it a sub of the OpenSSF, or is it directly just under the Linux Foundation as a project, like sort of like the mainframe project?
Yeah. So SSP is a top-level Linux Foundation project that's being bootstrapped. I don't think it's
not part of.
There's not the official charter, and everything's not out, but they're going through the process. OpenSSF is also a top-level.
That's a foundation in its own right, for sure.
Foundation under Linux Foundation, and I think that it's great to see. I mean, you can ask, are these efforts competing? Like how do they relate to each other? But even when you look at the CNCF, they have a bunch of security projects like in Toto and other critical ones for the cloud-native ecosystem. When you look at the CDF, Persia, which JFrog supports, has joined the Continuous Delivery Foundation and is part of that foundation. And I think that we all need to look at, regardless of your role, whether you're a developer, you're doing DevOps work, you're doing platform engineering, you're doing security, like we all have a role in securing the software supply chain. And we need to support the open source efforts going on for this, because the best defense against the attackers is having more information, more disclosers, more knowledge
cooperation
and
among vendors.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, man. And that's good. We're not going to be able to get to it today because we're almost out of time. But at some point, I'd love to sit down and get your views on, do we need to reorganize the Linux Foundation and make it I mean, there's a lot of foundations floating out here now. For our audience out there, I bet there are more than a few people who are a little confused. I'd like to see a sort of realignment of divisions like they do in the NFL periodically or something, you know? And
yeah, this is a longer conversation, but
no, not today.
I think there's a natural ebb and flow of, at the end of the day, foundations are just a vehicle for vendors and open source contributors and folks to come together and to collaborate.
Yeah.
And so you have this ebb and flow of projects or foundations being spun up and projects being spun up, but then they merge and they coalesce and they turn into like larger aggregations, and some of them thrive and take off. So the CNCF is very successful with its big tent philosophy. I'll see you at KubeCon, but that's become the mecca of tech conferences, and KubeCon EU is completely sold out. And
I think they're expecting Chicago to be so as well. You know, what's interesting there is CNCF, I think, has 60-something projects under the umbrella now. CDF, and our audience knows this, we do a monthly show, Laurie LaRusso and I, called CD Pipelines from the CDF. And what are they up to, about 10 now or something like that, projects. I recently did an interview last week with Fadi, the ED of CDF, and who was with me? Sasha Laboure from Cloudbees, who's now on the board over at CDF. And Jenkins, surprisingly, right? So now Jenkins sort of the grandpa of CICD. They did a report on usage and numbers. I was blown away, because we're a shiny trinket industry, right? What's new and shiny?
The old players in the CD space. We're all working together, and so Jenkins. So not a lot of folks know this, but we support a lot of the infrastructure that Jenkins runs on.
When you say, you mean JFrog?
JFrog.
I just got to make sure what hat you wear, because it's hard to see your hat on here, Stephen.
We collaborate with Gradle, which does a lot of builds for the Java ecosystem, and now they're spanning across multiple different platforms and ecosystems. Artifactory is the de facto standard for binary package management, which is the core of the JFrog platform. And if you think about it, the core foundation of what we know today as best practices for application deployment, and what gives you that
pipeline.
But what gives you that foundation to build security on? It's what was created by Cloudbees and JFrog.
The DevOps people over the last dozen years or so. That's 100% true. What's the other project that comes out of Netflix and Google? Spinnaker, another one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are anchors in every step, in every meaning of the word. Anyway, hey man, it was great catching up with you. I know we got a little bit off security and we're all over the place, but such is the nature of our conversation, Stephen. So
yeah, that's something good.
So I guess I will see you next. Actually, Swamp Up coming up.
Yes.
Tell the people about Swamp Up.
Yeah, so Swamp Up is the mecca of DevOps conferences. It's going to be in September in San Jose at the Signia Hotel, and it's going to be amazing. So we have Bruce Schneier, world famous security guru, who's going to be on stage. You get to chat with him and hear from him about his perspective. Bruce always loves to chat,
by the way.
We have all of the leaders.
John Willis, whose new book is out.
Tejas from Netflix.
Yes.
The list just goes on. All the key movers and shakers in the DevOps industry are going to be there, and we're selling out quickly. So if you want to be there, that's sign up.
Place to go. And then after that, we'll see you in Chicago in November for KubeCon.
Yeah.
All right. Stephen Chin, man of many hats, among them JFrog, Linux Foundation, OpenSSF, CDF, and a bunch, Rust Foundation, here live in Black Hat. We're going to take a break, so stay tuned. We'll be here in just a few minutes.
This is Techstrong TV.
This is Shira Rubinoff here at Black Hat, coming at you live. I'm here with Charlotte Baker, CEO of Digital Hands. Charlotte, it's such a pleasure to see you again.
So nice to see you. Thanks for having me for this conversation.
Pleasure, Charlotte. So can you please introduce yourself to our audience, tell them who you are, and besides being CEO, what you do for Digital Hands?
Well, my name is Charlotte Baker. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Hands, and love service design in the cybersecurity industry, and have run this company for about 2 decades.
Amazing. So let's dive deeper into that. Please tell us about Digital Hands, the journey of Digital Hands, how long you've been around, and the most important things we should know really about your company.
Well, as I mentioned, 2 decades. We're one of the oldest in the industry.
Amazing.
And we were started 45 days after September the 11th. Not the best time to start a company.
Wow.
For a couple of years, we couldn't give it away. In the early days, we private labeled for large organizations. And that was at a time when cybersecurity was really a component of IT. And so back then, it was all about software, hardware platforms, keeping them up and running and available for work. So it was about performance and availability. And over time, the industry has morphed, and we morphed along with it.
Excellent. So what specifically does Digital Hands do, and who are some of your clients who would need to utilize Digital Hands?
So the space that we occupy, I guess you would say, is the MSSP space.
Okay.
But truly the space that we occupy in the hearts and the minds of our customers is really around effectively staffing for detection and response and remediation. So we solve the labor problem. And in doing so, we focus on large enterprises. Typically, we had been with large enterprises due to our channel partner and private label partnerships. And over time, we have found ways through technology to be able to scale in order to capture market share in the areas where customers may be earlier on in their journey than the larger organizations. And so over time, you think about who needs us and why.
Yeah.
It's people who care about their data. We have a fundamental belief around organizations have the right to operate their businesses and their enterprises without the fear of extortion, theft, and brand damage. And so we are the specialists that do that. We go deep and bring the skill set to the table to help in a market where labor is very scant. I think the last stat I saw, there was something like 3.4 million worldwide and about 700,000 in North America alone of jobs that are going unfilled. And so we hit that space and always have. We've always been in the services industry.
Oh, that's very important. They say that there's a lack of talent in order to fill jobs that are needed. But then we talk about very mature companies and companies that may not be as mature, the different levels of companies and their growth and size and wherever that may be. And the larger companies or the more mature companies would feel, yes, we're targets, but maybe the less mature companies may feel, well, you know what, there's bigger fish to fry. What do we really need around this? How do we really need to protect ourselves? There's better companies to target. What would you say to somebody who would say that to you?
Everyone's a target.
Yes.
Absolutely, everyone is a target.
Yeah.
Some of the smaller companies, especially in the supply chain for the federal government or for larger organizations, are targets as backdoors. Everyone is a target, but everyone does have a different stage of their maturity and understanding. Some companies want to check boxes for compliancy, and they think that cyber is kind of a side benefit to that. Others are full-blown into it, understanding where the attacks are coming from. I think it's interesting that originally when we started the company, we were doing private label deals with some of the largest brands in the cyber tech industry. Then we morphed to work for some of the SIs, and we would always get the very difficult cases. And I would laugh and say, we can do the easy stuff too, but we would get the weird stuff, trying to make
some of the weird stuff.
The weird stuff would be trying to make some of the newest technologies work. And so our sustainable competitive advantage has always been taking a look at the newer technologies and putting a service wrapper around it. And that would solve the problem both for the people that we private labeled for that didn't want to spin up a group to support the new technology, as well as the customers that were buying the new technology that said, I don't have the staff that's trained for this. And so some of the more esoteric brands have actually already been morphed and bought by other larger brands, but usually it was a first to market advantage with a newer technology, with some of the first and early adopters of those technologies. Over time, I would say that we still do some of the esoteric stuff, some of the custom and bespoke service design for large organizations. But because we've honed ourselves over 2 decades on that particular sector, we've been able to take some of the lessons and some of the shortcuts and some of the systems and scale them to the point where if an organization is earlier on in their maturity cycle, we have prescriptive packages. So regardless of size, the larger ones will come to us for bespoke operations and integrations, completely integrating our back office with theirs, so that we're a very visible extension to them. Others will come and say, I'm a new CISO or I'm a new director of security and we're starting over again. And we will come to them with a prescribed package that says, here is the minimum required to play, and start them off on a cyber journey that over time morphs and increases in its prowess based on budget.
I think that is such a critical element that you're filling. Certainly the less mature companies are able to really know where to start and start off right, and not kind of pushing it to the side and saying we really don't need this, but they can grow with you. They can grow in their cyber posture within their organizations, and their security can grow along with it if they incept it from the beginning. And there's never a late time to start, right? Anyone can come at any time?
Anyone can come at any time. And in fact, you know, the one philosophy that we have is one size fits one. There is no such thing as one size fits all.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we bring to the table is the expertise and the skill set to run operations teams to deal with whatever legacy devices and whatever legacy infrastructure you bring to us. And so we do have our favorite picks for, you know, if you're going to let us subscribe to which technologies to use, we do have our favorites. That we've honed and we've integrated for very fast orchestration and response. But we can take, we call it WITO, W-I-T-A, W-I-T-O, walk in, take over.
Yes.
And that allows people to bring their legacy, not rip and replace, and to integrate with some of the newer technologies. The concept of some of the newer entrance into the space is that they standardize, they let the equipment, they let the software do the work, and then, you know, they're wed to that particular set. We're the ones that would come in and say, okay, even as a smaller organization, you know, what is the bespoke offering that we need to integrate? What do we need to integrate into our systems and into our solutions? And all of these SALs are custom scopes of work. Regardless of the size of the organization.
Well, let's say an organization has some legacy systems and they want to migrate out into newer solutions as well. Is that something you could help them with and keep that cyber, you know, stuff that they need around it and wrapped around it ongoing while this situation is occurring?
Yes, in fact, some organizations, some Fortune big ones, have used us exactly for that purpose. They have known that they wanted to migrate. They have known that they wanted, for example, a 3-year contract, and then they would take it over in-house. And so we look like a transition team in those cases. And then they bring us back in periodically to assist. And so the flexibility, I would say, is one of the superpowers that we have. And it's afforded by, again, 2 decades of doing this, very mature systems. We have twice the tenure of our employees as the rest of the industry, and have quite the creative expertise. We actually have a room called What Works.
Oh, yeah?
We've had it since 2001, and no matter where we've moved, the What Works room is where you go in and you take off your functional hats and you whiteboard and you figure out what works for a particular customer, and it results in some pretty industry-winning strategies that get us awards.
Well, it sounds like you really hit the nail on the head in one of the areas as well as the digital transformation across the organization from the C-level perspective. You're talking about operations, ongoing, continuous, you can't really slow down. Then the CISO, the CIO saying updated security and patching and whatever's going on. But how do those go hand in hand when they need to be incentivized the same way? And it sounds like you really provide that service around it to keep operations going, to keep it secure all at once. And that, I think, is something that organizations can look at when they're trying to implement the digital transformation across the organization and have the different folks work hand in hand together, because people aren't siloed anymore. Different types of roles are not siloed and cannot be in order to have a secure atmosphere within the organization. So I think that's just an extra layer of something you provide without even saying so. It's just, it's something very much needed.
That's very true. And, you know, organizations are morphing at very fast rates, and the days are gone where you would have a 3-year contract and say, this is what we're in and this is only what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think the most successful partners to organizations and CISOs are the ones that say, okay, here's where you are today. What you're going to need is going to change over 36 months, and let's plan for that now. Hit the milestones, make the changes, and the prices are not on a nickel and dime basis of, you know, that's an hourly rate, this is an hourly rate. You look at the partnership, you say, this is how we're in it with you to win, and you help them through the transition. And instead of dealing with multiple contracts and termination fees and things like that, it's a contract for the digital transformation and for the security maturity journey, and you're in it with your customers.
Wow, that's so important. And I think you really hit the nail on the head in many different areas when it evolves to this specific space. So if you could talk to our audience for a moment and say, here we are, digital hands, this is why you need us. what would you say in a concise way to our audience they could really understand, from everything you said, why they need to look at digital hands and see that they need to implement your solution?
I think looking at digital hands is all about saying, I need something different than what's in the marketplace today. I don't want to be sold to. There's too much technology chasing the dollars. I need to maximize my return on my security investment. And I'd like to look to digital hands in order to help me look at that strategy. We're not just there to sell services. We don't have a resale arm. We don't have a vested interest in selling you software or hardware. And I think as true partners, we bring that business solution to the table where we say maximum return on your security dollar and what's not needed and where are the highest priorities for you, and with no axe to grind as to what the manufacturer or what the solution is, or whether or not you keep your solutions or you buy new infrastructure.
Certainly, and I love what you said. There's no one size fits all. A lot of different solutions out there. You got to fit our profile in order to use us, and you really understand the marketplace and understand companies from less mature to more mature. They have different needs, different budgets, and different ways that they also want to face their global audience, but also internally. So I think that's very critical as well. So anything you want to let our audience know or leave our audience with around, the cybersecurity world as a whole? You've come from a wealth of knowledge. Your career is so impressive, and you've really made a mark in the space of cybersecurity. So anything you want to leave our audience with today?
I think we've covered most of it in this introductory conversation, and I really appreciate your time and looking forward to more conversations in the future.
Thank you, Charlotte, and it's my absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. And folks at Black Hat, we will continue streaming live shortly. We'll be back with more interviews. Thank you.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our Techstrong TV coverage live at Black Hat here in the desert in Las Vegas. And it's hot like a desert. I don't know how many of you have been to Vegas lately, but walking yesterday, the wind was so warm. I don't know if you had a chance to walk outside. I felt a little like Lawrence of Arabia or something. I was waiting for the sand to hit me. But anyway, the good news is once you get into the air conditioning here at Mandalay Bay and the throngs of people are at Black Hat, I haven't seen an official count yet, but it looks as big as it ever was. It's certainly back. I don't know if you know this woman. If you've watched Techstrong TV, she's been on, at least a half a dozen or more times. It's Anna Bellick. She is she runs the cybersecurity research team over at SysDig. And for those who don't know, SysDig has a pretty steady stream of reports that come out, a lot of different topics, a lot of great research and reporting coming out of there. Anyway, Anna, welcome so much in person, in the flesh here in Las Vegas.
It's very cool to actually meet you in person.
It's very nice to have you here with us. You know what, before we jump into the latest report and talk about Black Hat, let's talk about Anna. We've done this on Zoom, but now we're going to embarrass you in person.
Excellent.
Give them a little bit of your background, if you don't mind.
My background is unusual, as I guess is true of all cyber people. None of us are very cookie cutter.
Yeah.
I started out as a scientist. I did a PhD in computational physics.
Wow.
Yeah, into challenging problems. I guess that's my affliction.
Mm-hmm.
But I get bored easily, and physics is very like a long-term proposition. Like you have to commit to it for life.
Yes.
I did not have that in me. Mm-hmm. So I quit actually after the PhD, and I said I'm going to find the best job in the world, whatever it takes, and applied to hundreds of jobs. One of them was with Gartner, and I was 100% convinced they would never hire me because I knew nothing about IT. I was like a physicist, and they hired me to work on Docker containers and Kubernetes and like emerging technologies. Yeah, because they were looking for folks that were smart and could figure something out that was brand new.
And no one really knew it anyway.
No one knew it. There's not like 40 years of baggage.
30 years of Docker experience in the last two.
Yeah, so that's what I did, and I spent 6 years there working on those systems and then security of those systems, and then eventually made my way into the real world where we try to build security tools for the new world.
Absolutely. As crazy as it sounds, your profile in terms of what you were looking for, what you like, and what interests you is very common in the cyberspace. The cyberspace used to, I've been in cyber 25 plus years myself. It used to be a lot of people who used to like to break things just to see if they can be broken and then put them back together better, right? And also a lot of ADD, jumping around, shiny trinket syndrome. So you're with your people.
I am with my people.
You have found your tribe, as they say.
I have embraced my people.
And then, of course, you left Gartner, came to SysDig, where you're heading up, as I mentioned, the cybersecurity research team there. And then, for those who don't know, SysDig is a leader in what's called cloud native security. But cloud native today is so big and so broad. They're a leader in cybersecurity today because so much of what we do is involving cloud native. But their research division in particular has done some amazing work. Before we get into the latest report, if you don't mind, Anna, share a little bit bigger picture, right, about the research team and some of the stuff and work you're working on.
Sure, yeah. So this team is doing the thing that everyone hopes a vendor will do, and they're keeping track of what the bad guys are up to, so that we can build a tool that can help you defend more effectively. Mm-hmm. They have tons of approaches. They have a really impressive collection of folks there. So like ex-government, you name it. Mm-hmm. What their mission is to essentially design a research system. So it's a lot of honeypots. They work on real live data as well. Like if something happens to a customer, we're there to check it out. Mm-hmm. And then to summarize that into really what you should be looking for and what you should do. So if you're a customer of SysDig, or if you're just a business that has some kind of cloud security tooling in place, what are you even looking for? Like, how do you know when the bad guys are there?
Yeah, and this of course is a big problem because unfortunately, almost the nature of the beast is we don't find out until afterwards when it's hit the fan.
Yep.
But we are getting better though. I've tried really hard recently when I'm talking about cybersecurity. Breaches happen. It happens to the best of us. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we have made a lot of progress. Things are better than they were, and they continually get better. Some of it because of the work that your team is doing and SysDig in general. But overall, as an industry, we are doing, I think, better. Anyway, you guys have a new report that you're touting a little bit out here at the show. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's very fun. So this is our second one. Mm-hmm. We did our first one last year, and there's some themes that we've kind of followed through, and there's some new stuff. The newest, most exciting thing is probably the time element. So, we know cloud is fast. It gets you provisioned fast to do something new and cool. We also speculated that the attacks in cloud would be fast for the same reason, and now we have hard data to prove that. So we did a huge study setting up a bunch of different systems to see what the attackers would go after and how that would look. And so we measured specifically impact on verticals, like would they go after telco, finance, healthcare, what have you. By the way, telco number 1, finance number 2.
Not a surprise, I guess.
But now confirmed in cloud, but this is purely cloud. So
I understand.
And then the speed at which these things happen. So once they find you, which is quite easy because public APIs, exposed assets, etc. It takes them 10 minutes to start hurting.
Oh my God.
10 minutes.
Really?
Which, and that's an average, right? So in some cases it's like seconds. If it's like a minor or malware, they just boom, like it's there. If it's a more sophisticated kind of somewhat manual attack, it will be longer. But the early stages of the attacks are super fast because it's so highly automated. They have all these scripts, they're doing all this reconnaissance and discovery, find something juicy, send a WhatsApp message to the bad, whoever the attacker, and then they come in and they grab the credential and off they go. And then the second element that's like it's fast. What's maybe even more impactful is that it's quite sophisticated. So these guys know cloud. Right?
Oh yeah.
And I kind of joke, but not joke. Their full-time job is breaking cloud. And our full-time job is
trying
doing
to stop
what we
them.
do. Well,
right.
no, we have a business to run. I sell security tools, right? But you are a media guy, somebody else is.
Right, yeah, I don't have full-time. I know.
The security thing is...
it's the nature of the whole thing. It's cat and mouse.
Yeah, and the cat is...
always one step behind the mouse.
The mouse is fast.
Eventually we get the mouse, but there's more
the
mice.
Mouse moves on to more.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you a quick question on that though. So tech and finance, what was the...
Telco and finance.
Telco and finance were number 1 and 2.
Yep.
How big a drop off was it to 3 and 4?
It's pretty big. I think so. I might be wrong. Telco was 30-something%, finance was 20-something. It's like 34, 27, something like that. Next one was, I think, 15.
Oh, so what's significant?
And then, so what's interesting, and I wish I could remember what the third one was, but I don't. So telco finance, we were not surprised. We were actually surprised.
Healthcare, maybe the third one?
So healthcare was low.
Really?
Healthcare was only 5%.
Wow, that surprises me.
And then defense was low.
Really?
And so we kind of thought there would be more interest in attacking those kinds of orgs because healthcare is a huge target for ransomware.
Sure is.
Defense has always got delicious things to look for. So we have a suspicion that the cloud attackers
have a different priority set.
Yeah, they either don't believe they can get into those systems because they either don't have anything valuable in cloud or maybe they think it's better defended. Whereas finance and telco are like really
Wide
obvious
open.
targets for just fraud, like
Right.
so much fraud. Yeah.
Quick. And again, let's just do the anatomy of this. So a lot of these attacks are set on auto, right? They're discovering public IPs, discovering infrastructure, then they run an automated attack schema, and then if it returns anything, that's when it kicks off a WhatsApp or whatever to a live person who says, hey, I got a live one here for you.
Yep.
And this is when they do their thing from that point on. You know what amazes me? I said earlier, I've been doing this 25 years. We always had the gut that hackers are basically lazy. They go for the lowest hanging fruit. It's akin to walking down the hallway here at the Mandalay Bay and twisting knobs, doorknobs. And if they find one open, easy pickings. If it's too much of a hassle to pick the lock, they'll move on to the next one. And that's what it seems to be here. In 10 minutes, I'm making a decision. I'm in, I'm out, or I'm on to the next one.
Yeah, I think that
hasn't changed.
That's still true. It's the signals are a little different. Now, so we see, for example, that the most prevalent attack is crypto mining, right?
Yeah.
What free money is free money, right? But
and it's also
so the angle there is people go and look at that and they say, oh well, crypto mining.
It's just crypto
whatever.
mining.
Who cares? Like
right.
shut it down, forget it. But
it's not murder.
But it's testing the doorknob, right? Like if I'm an attacker, I plant a miner. It's not getting shut down very quickly. I'm getting a signal that this company is not paying attention. And then I go for something else because I'm like, okay, they're either not very secure or they're not very attentive to their tools. So maybe I can find more. If I plant a miner, it's auto shut down. I'm like, okay, I'm not touching that. Not worth my time, right? So there is that.
I think there's that. I think there's also a hierarchy of criminals. I think the crypto, right? Well, they're sophisticated. I think the crypto miner does crypto mining, but when he's had his full of that, he's like, you know what? This is an easy mark. I could sell that up the food chain.
Yep.
To the ransomware guy, or hey, this is a potential nation state, or one of these guys that I want to sell it to, and I think they do. I think they sell the access out.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's insidious. 10 minutes, my God. So what do we do to protect ourselves?
Cry softly into our pillow.
We don't. We just hope that the lion doesn't eat this zebra today.
No. I mean, in some sense, it's the same as always, right? Defense in depth, multiple controls, blah, blah, blah. I think we have to be honest with ourselves about the reality of cloud, right? So we have all these romantic dreams of, oh, it's so fast, so scalable, so wonderful. That all works in favor of the other side too, right? But we are enabled now to be much more secure, right? We can build much more resilient systems. We can redeploy systems much more quickly if there's an issue. So if we're leveraging all those tools, we are going to be much better positioned than we were on premise. So I think there's a lot of hope. Like it's not all doom and gloom.
No. You know what? That's why I prefaced it, because sometimes when we talk about this stuff, we tend to focus on the negative.
Yeah.
The fact is, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things we could do. There are things we're doing better. Immutable infrastructure is a beautiful thing that allows us to do that.
I'm a big fan, yes.
Yes. Interesting stuff. What else is in the report that's maybe of interest to our audience?
So one other one that's interesting. So this builds up on last year's work. So last year we went through Docker Hub and we looked for malicious images. One cool thing we saw last year was that you could find DDoS agents in the images, and they were actually used in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So you could be anybody, like not knowing anything about Docker or Ukraine or anything, and you could just download this thing and become part of a botnet.
Right, you are part of the zombie nation.
Wild, right? So this year we did deeper analysis on malicious images in Docker Hub to see if it was easy enough to tell when they were malicious. Because right now there's this big shift left, paradigm. So we're all scanning everything before we deploy, which is great. You want to do that.
Absolutely.
But what we found was 10% of those the known malicious, so definitely bad stuff, were not detectable with any kind of static analysis. Yeah. So you had to run the image and analyze it in runtime before you could see the malicious behavior.
Well, look, one could say 90% was detectable.
Yeah.
It's the other 10% that'll kill you. But,
well, just have runtime and out. So you need something because people believe that, if you fix it all on the left side, we're good forever. Obviously, that's not true.
Doesn't happen like that.
This is like a quantitative metric that says 10% of the time you're just.
Let me ask you another question, because I don't want to give Docker Hub necessarily a bad name. I don't think Docker Hub. Well, I'm not going to go that far either. But I don't think Docker Hub is necessarily any worse than any of the other repos.
No. And we scanned a bunch of repos. We just did the deep analysis on Docker Hub.
Right.
There is nasty stuff in, you name it. Like
They're all
GitHub, all of it. There's lots of nasty stuff.
I've been talking to a couple of the repo vendors.
Yeah.
Because maybe I'm naive, but my take is you need to have a guard at the door before anyone downloads stuff from you. You should, some of the responsibility, Mr. Repo owner or Miss Repo owner, is on you to clean your act up, because I come to you as sort of a trusted resource and you're not. Or be upfront and say, don't trust anything from me.
Well, yeah. That is a challenge. I agree with you that they bear some responsibility. I'm also a little empathetic to them because they've been under a lot of attacks lately.
Yes, they have.
So our team has found...
And it's a hard job.
There were lots of attacks that caused them to tighten some of their controls actually over the past couple of years. And then our team has found attacks against them that we called freejacking. So it's when they grab their freemium accounts and just abuse them for
I think I interviewed you on that one.
Yeah, you probably did.
Yep.
So they're having a bad day because clearly this technology moves forward. We're doing all these, repository scanning, rapid deployment, artifacts, etc. And then of course the attackers come in and they're like, oh look, a delicious new attack surfacing. So yeah,
but
cat and mouse.
It is cat and mouse, but this is also, one of the things about the whole cloud model was, yes, you could put more resources. A cloud provider or a repo owner could put more resources into protecting their mother load. But it's nevertheless a mother load that makes it more attractive. It's like a big piece of cheese for those mice, right? And I think ultimately some of the responsibility has to reside with them. The same way you look at what we did with the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, right? They have a responsibility to make sure that the apps, or we think they do anyway, that the apps in there are vulnerability free, or, not hacked. And when they do come out that they were vulnerable apps in there, we point the finger at Google and at Apple. So anyway, it happens. Anna, for people who want to go get more information on this particular report and stay abreast of the rest of the great stuff you guys do, where can they go?
Come to sysdig.com. It is definitely on the website. And reach out to us. We're around. I'm always happy to chat.
Anna, it's been a pleasure meeting you here in person for the first time. I'll see you on the Zoom next time probably. But until then, keep up the great work. You guys really, all kidding aside, and you guys do great work.
Awesome.
So
thank you for having us.
Thank you. Anna Bellick, she runs the cybersecurity research team over at Sysdig. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, welcome to Cloud Native Now. You know, we've been doing virtual events around the Cloud Native ecosystem for probably 5 years here at Techstrong. And I think this year is a really pivotal year. The theme this year for Cloud Native Now is the many faces of Cloud Native. You know, the Cloud Native marketplace, the Cloud Native community has really just taken off over these last 5-6 years. COVID couldn't stop it. It's back stronger than ever. I couldn't think of a better person to talk about the evolution of this community than our guest today, our guest of honor, keynote speaker, Chris. I'm going to try to do the real pronunciation.
Yeah.
Anesthesia, but I probably messed it up.
We'll take it.
Okay. Hey, Chris. Welcome to Cloud Native Now, and thanks for coming on today and sharing with our audience.
Definitely. Happy to be here.
So, for those who don't know, Chris is he's been CTO of CNCF for as long as I remember CNCF. How long has it been, Chris?
Technically, it's probably been a little over 6 years, but I was kind of the original executive director also when the organization started about 8 years ago. So 8 years in December will be or in December, 8 years, it'll be the year anniversary since we held our first board meeting for CNCF. Yeah.
And what a long and successful trip it's been. Not even strange. Chris, though, I want to jump into it. Yeah. Our audience is eager to hear all your views on this. Look, the point of this is when I first started covering, I think my very first KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, was up in Seattle, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And it was all Kubernetes all the time, basically, back then, right? I think 1.0, the 1.0 version, or maybe it was 0.8, something like that had just come out. And a lot of people thought Kubernetes was synonymous with CNCF, and CNCF was synonymous with Kubernetes, kind of like all spaghetti's macaroni. But I think what we found out is that not all macaroni is spaghetti, right? And there's more to Cloud Native than Kubernetes. One of the big, I think, kind of, red letter proof of this is this whole observability market that's sprung up, and it's really sprung up on the backs of 2 or 3 CNCF projects that are just, they're monsters. They rival Kubernetes in size. What's your views on this?
Yeah, it's a little bit fascinating, kind of to your point where in Seattle, in kind of the early KubeCon days, it was very, very kind of heavily focused on kind of Kubernetes. And then obviously there was a lot of discussions we had of, do we want to, double down on Kubernetes? Do we want to support a wider ecosystem of projects that kind of help, get people closer to Cloud Native? And, obviously we went for the latter approach and started to kind of grow ecosystems and networking, storage solutions, and observability now. And if you kind of look, at this, maybe you can kind of link in your notes here is, we do this kind of open source velocity diagram that kind of shows the breadth and size of communities, right? Kubernetes, obviously the largest in terms of kind of unique contributors on an annual basis, but closely behind it, you have projects like OpenTelemetry, Prometheus, and so on, which are obviously, in the observability space, and their communities are, pretty not too far off on the size of, Kubernetes. I think what we're essentially seeing is, if you go to KubeCon and you kind of go poll people, why are you here, right? What's going, and a lot of people are already kind of bought in on the Kubernetes, aspect or their migration to Cloud Native. They're looking for kind of the next step, right? And the next step generally is improve my observability, right? Improve my security, improve developer experience. And so we're seeing a ton of interest in the observability market in general. A big power of CNCF is generally bringing people together and trying to either build a de facto standard or try to solve let's call problems across maybe different vendors. And so if you looked at OpenTelemetry, for example, our probably second largest project now in CNCF, that actually started out as a multiple set of projects in the ecosystem. We had something called Open Tracing, which really just cared about the tracing aspects of the observability problem. And then there was an external project called Open Census, which kind of came from Google that was mostly focused on kind of metrics and a little bit of logs. And obviously we have things like Fluent Bit and so on that are kind of very, very widely used logging, aggregator solutions out there. And so Open Telemetry was birthed as, trying to unify a lot of these things and kind of having one way to do metrics, logs, and traces to kind of simplify things, because our end user community was super interested in helping, solve this problem. So they just have a little bit more leverage with some of the vendors they're using and are just able to kind of modernize their observability stack. And we've seen Open Telemetry become very, very successful in, a few years. It literally kind of came out of almost nowhere, a very, very small community, and now has grown to be our second most active project in CNCF.
It's bigger than Prometheus already?
Oh,
it overtook Prometheus.
So it depends how you define, it's like how you measure things, right? And so, if you look at the open source velocity diagram in terms of unique contributors, it is already larger than Prometheus. It has a lot more kind of unique authors and organizations contributing. I'm not bought in on adoption is always tricky to measure, right? Whether it's download or what people run in productions. Prometheus for sure is widely deployed. There's no question. Open Telemetry is a little bit more kind of like plumbing in many ways. So it probably has a different, deployment profile. And, obviously a lot of solutions out there like your Datadogs and Splunks or whatever, they'll support some aspect of, being Open Telemetry compatible. So it's a little bit more difficult to measure, but in terms of like unique contributions, it is second largest. Yeah. By far.
With the success of Open Telemetry, actually the success of all of the observability related Jaeger projects from CNCF, it speaks to the model, which is you can get a Datadogs, you can get a New Relic, you can get Logs.io, you can get all of these companies collaborating, even though they may compete in the market, that base level, because they all recognize that these projects are the guts, if you will, of so many of these commercial applications today.
Totally. And it's kind of amazing to see the initial focus, and Open Telemetry was very much on kind of logs, traces, metrics. And now everyone's kind of together in this, let's call it collaborative room of trying to improve, observability. And they're like, why not something new, right? And so, one other problem that a lot of people are facing is, large enterprises generally have not just one observability solution, right? They tend to have multiple, right? Maybe they have a SIM from back in the day, and they have some maybe new stuff, maybe a little bit Datadog here, maybe some new stuff from like a startup like Logs.io. It's a mix of everything, right? And what ends up happening, they're like, why do these all have like different crazy query languages, right? Like, why is there Splunk QL versus like what New Relic has? And so the folks in Open Telemetry and the CNCF community are kind of getting together with this, what they're calling like a query language standardization effort, right? Working group that they're kind of coming together first, where they're documenting all the different ones, they're seeing the compatibilities, and eventually that will most likely lead to like a spec or some type of project out there, probably part of Open Telemetry, to help standardize, query languages, so it's easier to build tools across all these different observability solutions. So to me, it's like the beauty of, once a community's together and fairly working out well, they start, coming up with cool things like a query language standardization, or, another, big thing that's going on in this crazy economy is people care about cost management, right? So we have a open cost project in CNCF, but what do you need to do cost management? You need a solid observability solution, right? So there's kind of this blending of costs and observability, and you're seeing this in the marketplace where traditional observability vendors now are also offering cost management, or even dipping their toes in the security or traditional SIM space, because how do you do good security without good observability? So it's kind of a fun little thing that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the utility of observability. I mean, look, a lot of people use it like Datadog, you know, for monitoring. It's obviously a monitoring tool. To me, security is a huge driver, as security is a huge driver of so many things today, of observability, replacing sort of my grandma's SIM and what have you. But it's such a Swiss Army knife, a utility that anything you want to grab with that. The other thing about it, though, but by doing it this way, Chris, we've accelerated the development, right? How long would it take, like the various pieces, the bits, if you will, of OpenTelemetry to have coalesced into a commercial product and to be so widely recognized? Wouldn't happen without this kind of model.
Right.
Yeah, I know. It's super fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's a business school, kind of
study. But even this query language thing, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take for SQL?
And even today, everybody's SQL is a little bit different, and it's, the Unix wars all over again, right? So it really is. It's an amazing story. When we look at observability, you gave us a great example here of now it's being used perhaps for, what we call FinOps and cost management and all that. What a great use it is for that. What else? I mean, do you still think you're gonna is it still hockey sticking kind of the growth of OpenTelemetry, Prometheus, etc.?
To your point about what's is it still hockey growth on the observability side and OpenTelemetry and some of these projects? So I think OpenTelemetry for sure, because they're entering new spaces. So I mentioned the query language standardization effort. There's also we had metrics, logs, and traces, but as you kind of do deep profiling of applications, you kind of profiling data, right? That's also not very kind of standardized, and there's discussions happening there. So once you kind of have new pillars added to OpenTelemetry with things like profiling data or query language standardization and new efforts, that causes a lot more growth and interest in the project. So I think you'll definitely see growth there. And I do think there'll probably be this kind of delicate dance between some of the cost management standardization efforts and some of the things like OpenTelemetry, because, there is rough kind of overlap here in some ways. So you'll probably see some collaboration between, projects like OpenCost, the focus effort out of the FinOps Foundation, and Open, Telemetry to kind of make this stuff easy, to use. And, if I just look at straight up KubeCon, data from people we survey, observability and security are the two hottest, topics, and they usually rank one or two, and they kind of switch sometimes between spots depending on the weather and the mood of the attendees.
So I was out in Amsterdam, obviously, and I would say that absolutely was the case. I'm looking forward to Chicago and see maybe sometimes Europe can be a little different than North America.
Totally.
Yeah, we'll see there. Hey, let's jump into our next topic, Chris, and that is cloud native beyond the cloud. So it's kind of funny to think about cloud native and cloud native computing foundation beyond the cloud, right? Without the cloud, but you've got the edge is really exploding. And whether you want to say the edge is part of the cloud or the edge of the cloud or whatever, it's not the cloud. It's not AWS or Google or Microsoft or public cloud in any event. And then you have these CNCF projects that really are running on the edge, on IoT devices sometimes, on endpoints, in private data centers, right? I don't know if anyone has server closets anymore, but
I'm sure there's probably some stuff running in server closets somewhere.
Totally.
WASM is a great example of this, right? WebAssembly. How, what do you view on this? Is it still cloud if there's not, is it still cloud native if there's not a cloud?
Yeah, it's a funny term, right? Because I think if you kind of look at the history, I think the cloud native was kind of coined by the pivotal, Cloud Foundry community back in the day. But it's kind of taken on its own life. If you look at the actual, CNCF technical board, stewarded definition of what cloud native is. It kind of comes that, cloud native is all about, empowering organizations to build scalable, applications and dynamic environments, whether it's public cloud, private cloud, edge, and, things like container, service message, things like OpenTelemetry, they're all kind of implementations of that, but it doesn't necessarily mean you run on like one specific cloud, whether it's public or private. It's all about running across these different things that enable you to kind of deploy and ship scalable, software. So if we kind of look at the stack inside of CNCF, we have a lot of projects that, I think enable cloud native principles, that I talked about that necessarily don't have anything to do with Kubernetes, right? You look at things, for example, we talked OpenTelemetry. A lot of people use OpenTelemetry without even having Kubernetes in the mix at all, right? It's just it's a generic kind of way to do, modern observability. You have things like Argo, right? Argo is becoming very popular in kind of the GitOps and inversion, AIT style community out there. And, a lot of people are just doing their workflow and then management of apps without even Kubernetes in the picture. It's just like, it's part of the cloud native journey of getting there. I think another good example is Backstage. Backstage has kind of popped up recently as just a lot of companies, when they get to a certain size, they need a central place to go to look at what services are running in production, who owns them, SLOs, and kind of like integrated developer experience, options to kind of write a new service, and kind of Backstage solves that problem really well. And like Backstage is like a funny project because we've, it's the one that kind of constantly comes up where we have companies that reach out that they're not even using Kubernetes yet, but maybe they're like an airline that just wants to improve their internal developer experience, and they're already like full all Backstage, and they're just starting their maybe Kubernetes journey. So it is, kind of an interesting thing that we're seeing. We're seeing CNCF's this home of, collaboration, vendor neutral, cross cloud collaboration, where it's kind of, burgeoning projects that, are building and enabling cloud native that are just purely outside of Kubernetes. You mentioned, WebAssembly, right? I view, WASM or WebAssembly as essentially just like a new form of packaging compute, right? We have VMs, we have containers. WASM is essentially kind of new form to package, compute, almost similar to kind of a, Java virtual machine where it could kind of run on different architectures, OSs, and so on. It kind of has its own a little optimized environment. It's still early days technology, but we've seen WASM pick up and be adopted in CNCF projects in many different ways. And even, multiple years ago, like in a simple case, we had projects like Envoy and Istio replaced their existing extension mechanism that was powered by Lua, which is like a lovely little language and kind of runtime environment, but also not very, super efficient, right? There's a hit every time you have to kind of start a Lua instance. WebAssembly, great, perfect. You could write plugins now in different languages, and it all kind of, cross compiles to this lovely WebAssembly bytecode that could run everywhere, very efficient runtimes. And so things like Envoy now support WASM, as kind of its extension, mechanism. But we're seeing a lot of new projects popping up in CNCF. We have things like WASM Edge, WASM Cloud. There's even Run WASI, part of Containerd, where the whole like plumbing of Kubernetes is starting to be rewritten to support running, WASM a little bit more natively than kind of the current situation, which is a bit of a, let's call it a kludge compared to maybe how simple it could be. But that's like the evolution of technology. You look at Linux. Linux originally was never really intended to like run in small embedded crazy environments, right? And then eventually people showed up and enabled it. So you now have Linux in your car, your TV, your, small little devices, right? So I think people show up, they do the work, and the technology evolves to meet new use cases.
Absolutely. And look, I think WASM, it's funny, I was talking to, was it Matt Cutler from Ferrymon?
Who gave us the whole story about how he
was the inventor of the CNCF animals, right?
What he did for his daughter.
Love it, yeah.
But I mean, there are some, look, he's a great ambassador for this whole WASM thing and everything going on with it. It has a bright future, and it does, I think, but not just it alone. A lot of the other ones you mentioned as well, really, to go where no CNCF has gone before, right? And
Yep.
And where computing goes, that's where I think cloud native goes.
Yeah, and WebAssembly is just a very interesting. It's still very early days. I try to caution folks, if you kind of look back at the history of containers and Kubernetes, in the early days, people sometimes forget that we had, obviously we had Docker Engine, but there was kind of a bunch of other upstarts. There was CoreOS had a whole Rocket AppC spec, like different way of doing container images. So there was kind of this compatibility and multiple runtime issue. Same things kind of happening in the WebAssembly space. They're still kind of in that like early standardization effort of like getting everything fully standardized. You have too many runtimes out there. Naturally market forces usually end up with like one dominant solution or 2-3 dominant solutions. It's still those things are still happening. So I kind of caution folks, like definitely check it out, explore it. I think your team should definitely look at it, but it is very kind of early days, but technology moves very fast these days. Matt and his company is doing amazing things to improve the developer experience, but there is this whole kind of standardization, effort. And I think in the next year or so, the Kubernetes and CF community is going to be, really kind of, almost WASM native. Like it's just going to be in a good position to kind of support WASM as kind of a runtime environment.
Got it. I think that's a great segue to our next topic, Chris, and that is the big dog, Kubernetes itself. Look, I remember a time, I guess it was a DockerCon in Austin. Right? I go to DockerCon in Austin, and, it was DockerCon was taken over by Kubernetes.
Everybody there was just
talking about Kubernetes. I came back to my office here.
Yeah,
that was originally when we did Container Journal. We had already had the name Container Journal. I was actually thinking of trying to use the word Docker, but that would have been trouble, and I went with Container.
Yeah, exactly.
And I came back, and that was the first time it
dawned on me, maybe that wasn't such a great name for what we were going to be writing about, and then but the fact of the matter was, for those who remember, Kubernetes was not the first orchestrator. And as a matter of fact, if you would have had a Las Vegas betting board of what was going to become the dominant orchestrator for this stack, Kubernetes wasn't the favorite. It would probably have been Docker themselves, right? Swarm and stuff. Or Mesos, or for that matter, Rancher OS. I mean, how many? There were a half a dozen easily.
Yep.
But the way the community coalesced around Kubernetes and it became the de facto standard is a great example of what you're talking about, which is, look, when it moves fast sometimes, right? It moved really fast, right? And me personally, I came back and told my team, this Kubernetes, everyone's talking about it. It's hard as heck. It's not easy. I don't know how people are going to, how widespread people are going to be able to use this. It's so hard. But nevertheless, that's why I still work for a living, and I'm not off in some island. But every dog does have its day, and these things are life cycles, right? Kubernetes is not the Kubernetes it was in, 7, 8 years ago now, 6, 7 years ago. What do you think, Chris? Where's Kubernetes on its journey, on its life cycle? What can we expect there?
Yeah, I know. I think we're still at a point where, sometimes you get biased based on kind of the, folks that you interact with, right? If you're talking to a lot of leading edge companies, you kind of see like, Kubernetes is everywhere. But, sometimes we'll, host an event at the Linux Foundation where we talk to the automotive sector, or let's call it the industrial IoT, let's call it very, very traditional enterprise. And sometimes you'll talk to folks and they're like, we're just kind of starting our journey with Linux, open source, and we're trying to Kubernetes cloud. So I think that the market is much larger than, I think we, kind of perceive sometimes. And so, I think Kubernetes has kind of really cemented itself as something that's available in every major public-private cloud, fairly safe choice. And the technology kind of continues to evolve to meet use cases just like Linux did. And, are there other, options out there? Sure. Just like there are other options out in Linux, right? FreeBSD is a lovely and great, operating system, but it's a fairly niche, community, right? The most of the world has decided to back, Linux as kind of the de facto system, but it doesn't mean there's other options that people, could use. Like, for example, in the WASM case, there's a lot of initial uptick happened with kind of people using HashiCorp's, Nomad orchestrator, because, Nomad's great. Nomad's great. It's a pretty great technology, and it's very easy to run a binary and orchestrate a binary where you don't have to do anything container related. And WASM at the end of the day is producing binary. So that's what people did. But what's happening now is people get together and like, you know what, we want to use Kubernetes. So how do we kind of make it better to support these use cases? And that evolution is starting to happen with the Run WASI project, part of Containerd. So I think, at the end of the day, like people will come together and make, things work. So, I think Kubernetes itself is kind of going through, if you kind of look at the releases, every release, it's generally APIs are kind of maturing. Things are moving from like alpha to beta to kind of, stable. Sometimes pieces of Kubernetes, are being simplified where I see, sometimes we spin things out, right? Traditionally Kubernetes used to ship with a lot of, in-class storage drivers or, that kind of ship with part of Kubernetes. That was kind of, essentially they did the work to kind of break that apart, and all the storage stuff exists out of tree, and now you have to kind of choose what you want. etcd was initially kind of spun off too as a separate thing. So I think Kubernetes is cognizant that traditional software or any type of software development, the traditional thing is let's keep building features, adding more stuff to the core, just the way software kind of works. And Kubernetes and things like Linux have done a pretty good job of historically of having some type of either plugin or module extension mechanism, or created something new and kind of allow the innovation to happen outside the core. And I think you're kind of seeing that happen with Kubernetes, over time, and they're kind of mindful about that. So I think they're going to have a healthy, next, let's call it decade, for sure. I think the challenge will be is like, when the core languages potentially cause you maybe to rewrite certain parts of the stacks, like Linux is kind of going through this interesting evolution now where they're looking at how to support Rust as a popular memory safe language, right? Because, love C, C++, but definitely comes with its downsides for sure.
No,
So
look, you're preaching to the choir, but the flip side of it is variety is the spice of life. And so the same way we see with Linux distros, right? What packages come with a particular Linux distro, but you could still add, optional packages. It'll be the same thing with Kube, right? And there are companies, all those companies that we were going to bet on as an orchestrator that now adopted Kubernetes, they all have their kind of unique distro, if you will, with their own, package recipe.
So I think we'll see more of that. You're correct.
But I think, if the core kind of stack of the cloud native stack with Kubernetes as its orchestrator, if that doesn't get upended, Kubernetes doesn't, right?
Yeah, I think the technology, the underpinnings will probably change. The API, if you kind of look at what Kubernetes is at the end of the day, it's like, there's a nice API server that makes it very easy to write extensible things that are kind of managed by a central orchestrator. That API server, it could be you could have a new completely core that is built maybe in Rust or something else that kind of supports, that API, and we can move to a new technology set. But we'll see. There's a lot of innovation. There's kind of like these fun projects called there's KCP out there that kind of came out of Red Hat. There's, even the folks like Crossplane, and there's others that are basically trying to use just like the Kubernetes API server to manage different types of resources. So I think we'll see some innovation, probably in the next couple of years in that space where Kubernetes may actually have even a smaller, lighter control plane, but the API will be consistent. Like I think we've all kind of agreed that having the Kubernetes API is not too shabby. The underlying technology may change in the future, just like Linux is going with the whole supporting Rust modules, which is a bit of a crazy effort on their end to kind of make that work.
I think it's meeting the network. You know what? Yeah. We made it over a half hour here without mentioning it, but this is a good time.
Yeah. Everyone's talking AI. Crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
But when we talk about APIs, is a great example, right? Where, you could start having modules talking to each other, doing APIs to each other via AI. What, if any, kind of impact are you seeing already, or we might see in Kubernetes?
Yeah, I mean, if you were in Amsterdam, you probably saw, there's maybe a handful or two, kind of startups that have either popped up or pivoted to kind of support, AI DevOps or AI, management workloads. Yeah, no, and I think there's many different approaches here. I think it's still very early, days, whether it's like, hey, maybe I could use AI to make it easier to write like an OPA or security policy. Maybe I could use AI to help with remediation. Maybe AI as like a co-pilot or buddy of mine to help me debug an issue, right? So I think we're still kind of in that innovation phase. The models and infrastructure is changing a ton. We have a lot of folks at the Linux Foundation this week at an AI conference in the Bay Area hosted by, I think, Databricks and a couple others kind of in the space. So it's like this stuff is quickly moving and evolving. There's all sorts of legal issues that are kind of being ironed out in the court system. But at the end of the day, developers are going to use stuff that makes their lives easier. So like if the developer experience is improved, if developers are able to save time, they're going to use these tools and kind of build their own variations. The productization of these things is a whole interesting thing. Like, how do you charge for it? Are people going to be willing to pay for it? I don't know yet. Like I'm still like a casual observer. We're using a lot of kind of AI tools internally at CNCF and the Linux Foundation to kind of help with our marketing copy, help with like kind of like a more. I think use cases at the end of the day. Yeah. So
it's the same here. Hey, this is a great transition to our last topic, Chris, because I want to be mindful of your time as well.
Sure.
And that's the future of the CNCF itself. Man, I was in Amsterdam. I went over to the CNCF store to pick up. I always look to see what's marked down. I bring my kids home T-shirts, sweatshirts. They love them. But the amount of shirt, they got a shirt for every project. You don't have enough space in the store for every project anymore. And, how many projects are there in CNCF now? Is it unruly? You could group them by families. How do you organize this?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think, we have a little over, I think it's like 162 projects now as of today. And, we have over 200,000 contributors spanning 180 countries. And if you kind of look at it, what's interesting is for historically a long time, Kubernetes made up the majority of the contribution ecosystem, which I think right now there's about 80,000 or so contributors to Kubernetes. Cumulatively, if you look at CNCF now, it's 200,000 total. So Kubernetes now is actually it's still a huge part, but it's no longer the majority, which kind of has shown the growth of the ecosystem. How do you manage it all? I mean, I think it's just our philosophy of, we enable, competition across our projects. And sometimes there's, good competition where people get together and innovation happens and you get better solutions. Sometimes competition leads to the convergence, of projects like open telemetry, which I think benefited everyone at the end of the day. So as long as we kind of basically enable market forces, and, typical market competition, which bubbles up the best, solutions, I think we'll kind of continue to see innovation happen. That does come with a downside. I think a lot of times, we have companies that come to us, it's like, I would just love to download a CNCF distro or a cloud native distro that everything is just like batteries included and worked. And I'm like, that's not the purpose of our organization. I think if you do that, yes, you have something that's a little bit easier. So something like a Cloud Foundry or an OpenStack, for example, right? OpenStack is great technology, but OpenStack was like one way to do networking. You use Neutron, right? You have Swift, do storage. And when you only have like one way and you don't allow for other competitive things, you kind of potentially lose out on, technology shifts. Like, for example, networking in Kubernetes, didn't really kind of take advantage of like eBPF technology, back then. eBPF was something that existed for a while, but never really, got a lot of steam until recently. And now the majority of kind of, I would say, networking or CNI compatible technologies all using, eBPF. Like if we kind of locked ourselves in with just one way, that evolution may have taken much longer. So I think, it comes at the cost of confusion sometimes of like, there's all these different, things, and they're like, oh, you call it KubeCon and Cloud Native Con. Why do you do that? I was just in, Israel, last week for our first Cube Day in Tel Aviv. And it was actually funny talking to folks where they're like, I thought Cube Day was only about Kubernetes. And I'm like, no. Like, people use Cube and KubeCon as like almost a shorthand to mean, everything cloud native. But I could see why it's confusing to folks, on the outside. And I think that's the bitter pill that we take to support this kind of innovative future tech ecosystem of, competing and collaborating projects. It gets a little bit confusing because you have too many choices.
You have a lot of rock stars. I mean, you mentioned Opa. Opa itself is there's a whole world built around Opa these days, man. It's crazy.
Totally. And so our stance is like enable this and, experiment. Sometimes things work, sometimes things don't. Like if you look at KubeCon, one thing we kind of do is we always rotate program chairs, right? And we always kind of have, they leave their unique take on the conference. We had Kelsey Hightower, if you saw recently, graciously retired from Google. I'm so happy for the guy.
Learn to live, as he says.
Exactly. So he was one of our early program chairs, and he left, his unique spin on the program. We had Liz Rice, she left her unique spin, and we have all these folks that kind of come in different little areas that kind of leave their own take and thing. And I think that's healthy, and that's why kind of KubeCon has kind of evolved. And like the other thing that we do, we sometimes experiment with new events. Like we have something called App Developer Con that was pushed by a certain segment of our community that was like, we love KubeCon, but there's a lot of infrastructure folks here. Like we want to reach app developers because we have technology like, Dapper or gRPC or other things that, hit that application developer more. And so we're like, all right, we'll do App Developer Con, see what the hell, happens there. Maybe it works out, maybe it's a failure.
Well, of course you got to, the other shoe of that is, well, now you have to do OpsCon or something like that. and to be fair, I saw it in Amsterdam. Amsterdam was the first KubeCon where I felt it was more balanced between op and dev, right? And from someone who runs DevOps.com, there's a constant battle for us here because we try not to play favorites. Totally. But I thought there was a really good balance where I think previously it was very app-centric.
Totally. And I think it's, over time it improves and like we share the data with everyone. And I think to echo your point, like the data definitely shows that there's a kind of a lot more balance between like infra op side and kind of app dev side than previously. And I think that's just reflective of kind of the community and the technology that kind of continues to, evolve. But like we experiment, like we used to do serverless days, or we had like serverless things, and we kind of don't do that anymore because the community kind of lost interest and kind of moved on to the next thing. So like we kind of pop these things up and see what works and, understand that.
Lab.
Yeah, sometimes it won't.
It's a lab.
Sometimes it won't work.
Sometimes they don't, but you fail fast. Yep. And you learn and you iterate, and that's the whole point of this, right? That's live and eat your own dog food.
And to be honest, we look forward to like folks like yourselves and like our wider community that does events, things like Cloud Native, now, and we have these little Kubernetes community days that are kind of like DevOps days that have sprinkled throughout the community. So seeing folks, kind of enabling them and helping them, connecting them with speakers or projects, something we kind of love to see, because this community is truly global and in many places. So it's kind of great to kind of support folks like yourself.
Appreciate it.
Chris, that's a great way to end this. Can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing with our audience today.
Hello, I'm Ori Siegel, CTO for Prisma Cloud, and I'm here to present to you the grand unified approach to securing cloud-native applications. And before we begin, I'll just introduce myself. So as I mentioned, I'm Ori. I'm the CTO of Prisma Cloud. I was previously CTO and co-founder of a company called PureSec that was acquired by Palo Alto Networks back in 2019. PureSec was a pioneer in the serverless security space. I'm also an app security veteran with over 20 years of experience. I worked at companies like Akamai, IBM, Watchfire, and so forth. I filed and they got accepted 30 patents in the fields of applications and cloud security, mostly around static, dynamic analysis, reputation, client reputation, web app firewalls. And I'm also a contributor to several organizations that you probably heard about, like OWASP, WASC, CSA, NIST, SANS, etc. You can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter via those links. So let's talk a little bit, let's spend a couple of minutes talking about how our view of application security is constantly challenged and disrupted whenever a new technology is starting to get used and starting to get more common in our technological stack. So in the beginning, 20 years ago, when I was still building web app firewalls at the end of the 90s, the focus was really on the application layer, and that's when WAFs came to be, and later on application security testing, and then a few years later, cloud infrastructure, public cloud infrastructure became popular. And so we saw technologies or, solutions like cloud security posture management. And then people figured out the complexities of IAM roles and permissions in public cloud. And so we saw product categories around IAM security, or referred to as KIM today. And then people started building these applications using infrastructure as code. And so we saw scanners for IAC templates and IAC security. And then containers took off, and serverless as well. And we saw cloud workload protection become a thing and generate a lot of buzz around it. And that evolved into agentless scanning for cloud workloads, which is obviously a method that many people prefer. And, in the past few years, we've heard a lot about vulnerable OSS packages. And so SCA, or software composition analysis scanners, became the big thing that everybody talked about. And really recently, we've heard a lot about API security. And so API security became a thing. And every time there's a new layer of technology that we use when we're developing applications, there's a new category of security products that takes our focus from the main thing, which we'll talk about in a minute, and defocuses us or disrupts our ability to apply security properly. So, looking at what changed in these 20 years, in the past 20 years, maybe 20 years ago, the way we developed applications was rather simple. We had the infrastructure, the hardware, we had the network, we had the application layer, and we had our data, the applications data. And it was very easy to secure applications that were built and were running, they're built in a monolithic way and running in our own data centers. We would probably put a web app firewall in front of the application, put a firewall. The perimeter was very clear and easy to understand. Everything was inside this little bubble. Today, things changed rather dramatically in the way we use technologies to build cloud native applications. So first of all, obviously, cloud native applications are a lot more complex, are made of a lot more components. But they are using public cloud infrastructure, and we're using, in many cases, public cloud services like storage buckets and databases. And we use IAM roles to grant permissions, to access these services. And we have the cloud networking. And if you're using orchestrators like Kubernetes, then you have the orchestrators, and the orchestrators are running workloads. And then on top of that, you have your own application, which is also broken into many different pieces. You have your custom code and third-party code, and you have secrets and microservices and APIs and web interfaces. And you have a very sophisticated CI/CD pipeline that helps to automate the deployment process. and you have infrastructure as code to help you to codify how this whole thing gets deployed. And so many different layers, a lot more than what we used to have 20 years ago. And what happens when you have more layers, that directly translates to more security tools. And that is a problem with the cybersecurity industry. Our response as a vendor, our response to having more and more layers was to build more and more categories of security products. Just looking at a few of those, and really I listed, I think, about 30 here. You have your cloud security posture management that I mentioned, and infrastructure as code security, and then cloud IDS, IPS, and cloud incident response, and Kubernetes security, and container security, and then on the application level, you have SAST and DAST and IAST, and really a lot of different products. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, how many security products do you really need in order to secure an application? And the question, you can twist this question a little bit by asking, when is it, or how many products will make you feel secure, or make you feel that you checked all the boxes that you need in order to go to sleep peacefully at night? And beyond that, thinking a little bit more, perhaps we're also losing some things when we are using many different point solutions. One might argue that if you choose to go with the best of breed of every point solution, the overall security coverage that you have is much greater than just picking a few of those, but that's not the reality. You are losing when you're using many different point solutions, and that's what we're going to spend a few minutes talking about right now. So really, three things that are a problem when you choose to go the way of using many different point solution. The first is manageability. The second is your ability to effectively triage issues. And the third is security. And we'll get back to that in a minute. It sounds a bit funny because you're buying and using a lot of security products. Why would security be a problem here? So manageability, I don't really need bullets to explain that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. When you have a wide range, a wide set of tools, of many different tools, you need to maintain them. You need to make them, make sure that they're all up to date with the latest and greatest and signatures, etc. You need to have a team that knows how to use all these tools. So managing a wide set of tools, that's really becoming a problem these days. And through a recent survey that we are quoting here, we saw that the average security team for an enterprise uses around 70 or 76, to be precise, different security tools, which is really mind-boggling. Just think about, how do you manage 76 security tools? Now let's talk about, I think, the two more interesting aspects of using point solution. One is the ability to effectively triage issues. So, I have the Tower of Babylon here, and the way we develop and we secure software today, we have multiple teams. We have the dev and the DevOps teams. They are using their own tools. They use an IDE. They use a Git repository. They have their own CI/CD pipeline. If they are using security tools, it's probably either SCA, software composition analysis, or SAST. You have your cloud security team. The cloud security architect usually would be using cloud security posture management and cloud workload protection tools. And then you have your SOC team, the operations team. They are using SIEM and SOAR and monitoring runtime events. And then you have your AppSec team or AppSec engineer using a DAST scanner and a WAF to protect the applications. So how do these people communicate between themselves? And I'll give a few examples. We don't have to go through the entire matrix here of communications. But for example, the AppSec engineer will run a DAST scanner, will report vulnerabilities to the developer. And they will report based on a URL because that's what they know. And they will let the developer know, for example, that there is a SQL injection or a cross-site scripting in that URL. They can also report vulnerabilities to the cloud security team, whether, if they found some problems. The cloud security team will communicate with the developers, telling them about misconfigurations and vulnerabilities. They will talk about incidents to the cloud SOC. The cloud SOC will talk using alerts back to the developers or the DevOps team, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that each and every team that is trying to help secure this application is talking to the other team using a different language because they're using different sets of tools that don't necessarily speak the same language. And that is becoming a problem when you need to communicate that there is a problem. So I'll give you a real world example. If you ever tried to correlate these different tools, you have DAST that talks URLs and vulnerabilities. You have SAST that talks lines of code and maybe different sets of vulnerabilities. You have WAF that has events, and you have SCA that talks in packages and CVE IDs. How do you correlate these issues? And many times they will report the same issue, but speaking a different language. So your ability to triage these alerts is really bad. You can't really correlate these. You can't really triage this, and you will end up being very ineffective and in many cases going after the same issue from multiple different angles. And so what we've heard from organizations is that 83% of organizations that succeeded in using DevSecOps and securing their cloud application actually succeeded because they used 5 or fewer vendors or security tools, which is something that you have to remember. Now let's go back to the third issue, which is security, and that's quite surprising, actually. I'm going to start with an example. And in this example, we have an application, a cloud native application. It's a file processing microservice that is deployed as a container. In the normal use case, the user will communicate through a web form and will upload a file that will get stored in a storage bucket. And the client will also send an API notification, an API call through an API gateway that will wake up the cloud workload to go fetch the file from the storage bucket and run some analysis on it. Now, assuming there is some vulnerability, like in an open source package inside the container, inside the workload, the way an attacker would exploit this would be as follows. The attacker will upload some malicious file through the web form to the storage bucket, and the malware will get stored in the bucket. Will then initiate an API call with the file location, the new file that was uploaded to the workload. The workload will process the file, the exploit will run, will execute, will explode, will gain remote code execution over the workload that will then steal some secrets from the workload, will take over the cloud account and allow the attacker to exfiltrate data. So as you can see, and going back to different layers of the application, what the attacker is doing here is crossing through many of those layers of the modern application stack that we talked about. And if you were to try to use separate point solution along the way, they wouldn't be able to understand that this is all one attack sequence. You might place an API protection solution here, monitoring the API, but there's nothing illegitimate or malicious in the API call itself. It's just telling the workload what it's supposed to know, that there is a new file. Then you have a malware in the bucket, and so forth. So placing point solution along the way wouldn't work. You need something that can look at the entire scenario end to end and understand that there is an attacker here that's trying to cross through all of these layers together. Another example, and this is from a real world, very famous financial organization breach that occurred in 2019. This started with an attacker finding a server-side request forgery vulnerability in the code that was running on a web server running on an EC2 instance. The attacker then abuses the server-side request forgery to send requests to the metadata service of the cloud provider. That's a URL that's only exposed internally, so the SSRF is used to carry this attack. And the attacker extracts the session tokens that belong to the session of this EC2 instance. Using these tokens, the attacker sets these tokens locally on their own laptop machine at home and can now perform or run CLI commands directly to the AWS account. What they do first is try to list all the storage buckets in that account using that IAM role. They manage to find some sensitive data in a bucket. They read the contents of the bucket, the contents of the file that contains sensitive customer information, and they steal the contents by copying them, essentially doing a synchronization, getting the files back to their own machine. Again, crossing through multiple layers and essentially escalating from a medium vulnerability. And SSRF would usually be considered a medium severity vulnerability, turning that into complete data exfiltration. So in the cloud context or in the cloud native context, these attacks cross layers and escalate very quickly, as you just saw. So let's get back to the problem of point solutions. When you are using many, many different point solutions, as you've seen, and these are not a part of one single platform that sees everything end to end, you are seeing parts of the full picture. You're not seeing the whole picture. Each of these tools is not seeing the real picture. And the real picture is the application. When you're trying to protect an application, you need to think about the application. You don't, or you can't, or you shouldn't think about each separate component of the application. If you think container security, you're missing the point. If you're thinking cloud misconfiguration, you're missing the point. You need to see the entire thing end to end to understand how to protect it. And as a result, when you're not seeing the application end to end and you're focusing on the different layers, you essentially fail to secure the application. You get a false sense of security. And you have siloed protections that are not really harnessing the power of seeing things end to end. And we will get back to that in a minute in a few minutes when I explain the kinds of benefits that you can get when you see everything end to end. So let's take a break for a second. Essentially, what you're hearing me saying is that you should consolidate all of your security tools into one platform. And, if you've been around enough in the cybersecurity industry or heard about, been in touch with the cybersecurity industry in the past few years, you know that that's not the first time that somebody tells you that we need to consolidate, that there are too many tools. There have been attempts to do that in the past. Most of them failed. The question is, what changed now that brings me to ask you or to tell you that you need to consolidate your cloud native application security tools? And here, I really want to maybe take a different approach. Usually, a security vendor will try to frighten you about the things that are related to new technologies. I want to show you a few really interesting features that are actually very positive when it comes to cloud native, to adopting cloud native technology. There are a lot of benefits to adopting cloud native technologies. The first is that deploying security solutions has become super simple. I'm sure that if you ever deployed cloud, things in the public cloud, you've clicked that button before. You know that button. That's when you launch a cloud formation stack. It really takes one click to deploy a security solution where, in the past you needed to deploy maybe a box, a physical server, or to deploy an application and install it and learn how to use it. Today, it's a one-click thing. You grant the security vendor access to your cloud environment, and they start doing their thing, doing their magic, giving you visibility to the problems, etc. So super simple installation in the cloud native world. The other thing is the codification I talked about infrastructure as code templates. So everything in cloud native can be codified, and that allows us to trace from code to cloud how the application should look like. So think about in the past when somebody logged or maliciously logged into a server that you owned and changed something, there was zero capability for you to know that something changed unless you have some kind of security controls. Today, you can look left inside the code, your code repository, see the exact recipe of how the application should look like. What are the components that make up the application? Then look to the live production environment and see whether there was a drift, whether what you have running is actually what you intended when you developed the application on the left, inside your code repositories. The second thing is, thanks to the microservice architecture that is very common in cloud native applications, everything is broken down into very small units, computational units. Everything is very focused. You have a microservice for logging user in. You have a microservice for running some kind of file transformation. You have a microservice for a shopping cart. It's very easy to analyze these microservices. They are not a monolithic, a huge behemoth of a monolithic application. It's very easy to understand and to analyze these microservices and the interaction between them, and that really helps from a security perspective. And it also allows you to very easily model how the application should behave. For example, a microservice that its only purpose in life is to log in users into the application obviously shouldn't be running crypto mining operations. It doesn't make any sense. So it's very easy to have some kind of AI or machine learning model that models the good behavior of the application and then flags anomalies. It's much easier than it used to be when we had monolithic, not cloud native applications. So there are really a lot of opportunities from a security perspective when it comes to adopting cloud native technologies. I want to take a step back and talk about what I refer to as the cascading effect of modern software development and the modern CI/CD pipelines. So, if we look at modern software, obviously using open source packages, and that package will usually be used in multiple code repositories, multiple projects. Each of these code repositories generates or is a part of a bigger CI/CD pipeline that that creates the artifacts. And so, of these pipelines, we have numerous container images that are getting created. And you have one software package. It goes into multiple code repositories that generates multiple CI/CD pipelines that generates multiple container images. This keeps on growing. And this gets deployed in many, many different, for example, Kubernetes clusters on many different cloud accounts and cloud regions and even multiple cloud services. And then you have these Kubernetes clusters running many, many, many container instances, some of which contain that software package. And if we assume that the software package could have a vulnerability, you end up with one vulnerable software package that quickly cascades into a problem of thousands and thousands of vulnerable running container instances. And, at the end of the day, this means that when you look at the live environment and you start scanning it, for example, you using legacy tools that scan each instance for vulnerabilities, you get 5,000 alerts. And that is, think about the problem. We started with one vulnerable software package and we ended up with 5,000 alerts. And software packages is not the only thing or vulnerable software package that can cascade. Other things can cascade as well. When you have an issue in an infrastructure as code template, a misconfiguration, that cascades as well. When you have a vulnerable open source package, that cascades. When you by mistake embed or hard code a secret into a piece of software that cascades to the many, many different instances. And so for the same for vulnerabilities in your custom code, application configurations, and flawed business logic. One flaw in the business logic gets replicated to thousands of instances. And so, looking at this cascade effect, the ability to trace from code to cloud, and sometimes even from cloud to code, can allow us, assuming we have this capability, to trace back these 5,000 errors to the single line of code that actually generated that snowball effect. And that's what we would like our platform to be able to do. We would like it not to alert on 5,000 different instances of a problem, but rather point to the code commit, the single code commit, and that specific developer that created the problem, and let them know that they need to fix it in one very specific location. And this brings us to cloud native application protection platforms, or CNAPP, as they are referred to. And you will hear about CNAPPs from many different angles. Different vendors arrive to building a CNAPP from a different perspective. Some will tell you it's related to cloud security. I really dislike that idea. That's not the purpose. Or a CNAPP or a cloud native application protection platform is not a cloud security tool. It is actually a platform that helps you to, first of all, gain visibility to the problem that you have in your cloud native applications. It then provides you with tools and controls to prevent risks from actually getting deployed. And at the same time, it provides the ability to gain insight and deploy preventative measures, real-time preventative measures during runtime. And what CNAPP should give you, and that's the whole, the vision behind this the platform, is many different security controls, or you can call them guardrails in some places, that map to different locations in your CI/CD pipeline, in your application lifecycle. Starting from the left with code scanning and source composition analysis, scanning for secrets in the code, scanning infrastructure as code templates, making sure that your supply chain is secure, your CI/CD pipelines cannot get poisoned or accessed by unauthorized entities. Then during the deployment, you want to perform vulnerability scanning as part of your CI/CD process. You build the images, you scan the images, pre-deployment. And then as we move to the right, to the runtime, you have cloud workload protection and cloud security posture management, and cloud identity and title management, or IAM security, and web app and API security. And of course, data security to make sure that your data is not exposed or leaked in any way. So a cloud native application protection platform should give you all of these different controls and guardrails throughout the application lifecycle. And this is really the final section of our talk today. I'm going to give you a glimpse of, some of the good stuff that you can get, some of the benefits from having a single platform that sees everything end to end. And we'll take the case, the very interesting case of API security, and reconstruct it from the perspective of a CNAPP. And again, I don't believe in the term API security; it's all application security. But I thought it would be a good and interesting demonstration of the power of a CNAPP. So if you ever done API security to some extent, you know that there are certain tools that are being used for doing that. The security team will use an API security tool that will list the API endpoints, perhaps alerting about some risks to the API endpoints. But that's what it does. It looks at traffic, it alerts you on risks to the API endpoints. And then at the same time in your organization, you probably have somebody running some kind of software composition analysis on the code, flagging, vulnerable packages. So you have one person working on the code on the left, finding vulnerable packages, one person working on risks to the API endpoints on the other side of your organization, and they don't talk to each other. And then you have yet another person that's responsible for cloud workload protection. Perhaps you're a SOC team or you're a DevOps or SecDevOps team, and they are monitoring the cloud workloads, checking whether there are vulnerabilities or attack events. And these three people are not really talking between themselves. Each one is concentrating on a different aspect of the problem. So you have three teams using three different tools, getting three different alerts or events, and you have one application. So you can't really expect these three people to be able to triage the problem effectively. And the CNAPP approach to doing that would be all in one platform that harnesses the power of seeing everything from all of the different layers. So you start with the visibility to the API endpoints, and the platform can alert you about risks. For example, we detected that an API endpoint uses sensitive data, that the endpoint itself does not require authentication, that it's reachable from the internet. But then the platform, because it sees other layers like the container layer, for example, knows that there are risks to the workload itself, to the container. There are critical severity vulnerabilities. The container can be accessed over the network. You can gain remote code execution. There are some packages that are being used in runtime, vulnerable packages that are being used. So that's another set of risk factors from an underlying layer, not the API layer, that definitely affect the risk to the API itself, because the API is running on the cloud workload. And so you can obviously ask the CNAPP platform to apply real-time protection, not only alert about the risks, but actually prevent the risks using the web application and API security module that it provides. And then it can also provide at the application layer the ability to virtually patch some of these exploitable packages. So for example, let's say we found a log4j vulnerability inside a package running in the container that's hosting the API, and the package is in use. We can then apply a virtual patch and prevent that specific attack, giving you the time to go and fix the code, update the vulnerable library, and so forth. So as you can see, we started with a very small, narrow mindset of we're coming to do API security, but then we harness the power and the visibility of seeing through all of the different layers because we are using one platform that sees everything end to end and can prevent at all different layers. So just to summarize, this unified approach obviously answers the problem of manageability. You have a single platform that gives you full stack cloud native application security from code to cloud. It can allow much better triage of issues. You can connect the different dots. You don't have to look at different issues from different perspectives and not know that they are all the same problem. And it gives you better security because you're collecting signals from all of the different application layers, and you can apply, as you've seen here, a much more intelligent and more secure and more capable protection layer. And that is the whole point of using a cloud native application protection platform like Prisma Cloud in this case. And by that, I'd like to thank you for joining me and enjoy.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and Techstrong.tv.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry experts to give you the latest in the tech world. We'll be back again on Thursday, so we hope to see you then. In the meantime, though, if you want more Techstrong TV content, be sure to check out some of our podcasts or download our mobile app. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.